Most times when you think anime archetypes, you get things like draw 5 cards, win the game, 100,000 attack. But in the anime there are also examples of how do I put this? They're fucking awful. This is what we hope to categorize today in the inaugural episode of the newest series here on JCD Gado, Dynasty of the Useless. The show that is not ripping off Legacy of the Worthless no matter how much you think it, because even Rada himself gave me the blessing.
Yeah, sure, make an anime Legacy of the Worthless. I mean, what could possibly be more relevant for a competitive card game channel than reviewing decks nobody wants to play and nobody can ever play even if they wanted to?
If that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. Anyway, we're going to be talking about possibly the worst archetype in the history of the anime, or at least the one that sticks out the most in my mind, Alchemy Beasts. Alchemy Beasts were used by the super-duper Asian professor in GX, Professor Banner. Omnail, as he was called after he transferred his soul into a Gara-looking copy, played this deck for the symbolic reason that alchemy is birth, death to make life, etc. Unfortunately, the deck can't even stand on its own 2 feet, let alone be resurrected from the dead. GX was known for many one-off decks, almost all of them being completely terrible. At least it gives me a lot of work, right? I can see why Rada needed to pass the sword to another, as its glimmer only shines against the light of a star standing atop a fucking mummy. The first card in the archetype we will cover is actually a spell, since it's the card every other card seems to need. Alchemic Kettle Chaos Distill says that any card sent to your graveyard is banished instead. That's it. That's literally it. It's a macrocosmos, but only for you. And while this does play into the overall idea of the archetype, which is banishing cards, we'll talk about that little thing later, it doesn't help that your opponent can still use effects of cards in their graveyard with Beatrice, Dante, and Xyz Summon in general, Phantom Knights, Shaddoll, Metal Foes, Galaxy Cyclone, ABC Monsters, Artifacts, Mermails, Yangzings, Blackwings, Firefist, Bujin, Dragon Rulers, Card Trooper, Chronomalies, Cloudians, Constellars. The point is that if the card was a 2-sided Macrocosmos in spell form, it would be limited along with D-Fissure and Macrocosmos as very good anti-meta cards. As it is right now, it's just a debilitating card that holds back an entire archetype. Aritos the Tin is a level 3 Rock Wind attribute monster with the following effect. It cannot be normal summoned or set, which only reminds me of much better cards that have this clause because they'd be too broken otherwise. This is not that. It must be special summoned with Tin Spell Circle and cannot be special summoned by other ways, because Call of the Haunted would simply be too good. But holy fucking hell, man, 500 attack to the face! Now, if you like this incredible example of Submarine Roid getting outclassed, you'll adore the fact that it's printed on the text of 6 cards! I repeat, this effect was copy-pasted onto 6 monsters, all of different attributes. This makes attribute-specific cards a little hard to play, and it forces you to run multiple Aritos the Tin to actually get out Totem Bird. You know, that decent card that takes almost every card in your hand to summon in this deck, but could be made with Terror Top and Tataka Tomborg and Speedroids without even using a normal summon. The only upside is that they're all level 3 rocks, which makes Gorgonic Guardian a must-have staple in the extra deck at 3. Negating effects once per turn and making the attack 0 is a great effect, but it's hard to bring out, especially in any deck that is not this deck, even though this deck does not do it well either. Still, some praise can go out to making a card this good actually summonable. It's like if there was a deck based completely around a Herakti-like card, but instead of the Egyptian gods, you needed to tribute 3 monsters that required taking 8,000 damage upon summon. Possible, but nowhere near worth it. Since every monster can be summed up as Aritos the Tin but asking God why he was created, Aritos the Snack, Aritos the Kitty, Aritos the Ball of Disappointment, and Aritos the Shark, who I guess is also a snack, it would be wise to simply go on to the spells. Each and every spell specifically summons one of the Alchemy Beasts by name from the hand or deck, as the graveyard is simply supposed to be non-existent. Even when the monster's effects are abysmal, the spells don't help, as the cards need Mrs. Potts to be on the field to activate because otherwise it would be too broken, I guess. Simply too circumstantial and bricky to be considered anything but a lost cause. A way to fix this would have been a single spell card that says you can summon one Alchemy Beast from your hand deck or graveyard when you have Kettle. Maybe make it continuous and search another copy of itself during the end phase or something. You have a pretty decent spamming deck that can make rank 3s like their name's BA. Since this was during the whole Sacred Beast fiasco in GX, those continuous spells can be tributed for Hamon if you really want to. See, I can think of these things in like a minute. Why couldn't Anime Konami? In case the idea of centering an entire archetype around a single card sounded like a bad idea. Genix! Anime Konami made even more cards like it. But they look like they were drawn in MS Paint by one of the interns that was given 10 minutes to draw 4 cards and basically said, fuck it, we got Venn diagrams. Wide Process Albedo is a spell card that summons out a golden homunculus from your hand or deck as long as you control the unfunny meme. To see how good this card is, throw a gander at the golden giant himself. He's an 1800 attack, level 6, that gains 300 attack for each banished card. Of yours. They were so close to making this card just that little bit better, but they messed it up! They knew Alchemy Beasts would be doomed to be kicked out of locals for the exact opposite reason as Zodiacs. Anyway, the attack gain is pretty sizable, especially with the introduction of Pot of Desires into the deck, and Homunculus can actually one-shot your opponent if you live long enough. A card that can bring this beast out of the deck is pretty nice, and make sure you don't have to waste a tribute to get it out. Which is pretty important, because there's no way in hell you can play the kettle, play a spell to get out a beast, and then tribute Homunculus without wasting your entire hand and hoping you didn't draw the goddamn beast in the first place. Decent card to run 2 of with 1 Homunculus. Black Process is a spell card that requires the Patty Gadget and no cards in hand. Already off to an amazing start, I see. You can banish all Alchemy Beasts you control and draw 2 cards for each, effectively going plus and allowing you to summon ever more Alchemy Beasts if your draws are in your favor. This card is actually quite good, if a tad circumstantial. Channel. Yellow Process Kitten Linux tributes the skinny Helios for the thick Helios, which is something Duo Magistus already does from the hand. While this can summon a slightly stronger monster from the deck, neither monster is actually a good card by most means, so we'll get to them when we get to them. Red Process Ruby Doe is the same thing but tributes thick Helios for triple Helios. And in my opinion, this one can be summed up with the last segment, but only more so. Since we're done with the cards that should artistically fit like a puzzle, but I guess just don't, we can move on to the Helios cards that are a direct tie-in to the Alchemy Beasts. Strangely enough, they're actually all printed in real, and all of them are terrible. Helios the Primordial Sun is a level 4 light pyro monster. That's the reason you can Solemn Warning a Macrocosmos, regardless of actually having one in your deck. You know a card is good when it debilitates a better card that actually gets used, as if the world would explode if this deck was anything beyond pure liquid ass. It gains 100 attack for each removed from play monster, which is a shame because it would be infinitely better to include spells and traps as well, considering Dan Rather banishes every kind. Seriously, it only gets worse with each incarnation. Thick Helios is a level 6 that can be special summoned by tributing regular Helios or using the Cat Mac. It's Helios, but gets 200 for each banished monster and has the following effect. If the card is destroyed by battle and... Actually, wait, let me zoom in on this one. Sent to the graveyard. Yeah, we're both reading that, right? Special summon it during the end phase and give it a whopping 300 attack. The archetype is based on banishing monsters, but it actually needs to use the graveyard for 2 monsters. That, coupled with the fact that it takes until the end phase and has to be by battle, really makes Duo Magistus complete anti-synergy for a deck that never knew what it wanted to do in the first place. And it only gets worse, because Triple Helios is just what happens when you get really caught up in what you think's a great idea until your friend smacks you and gives you some sense. The 200 is bumped to 300 for each monster banished, and it still will never be summoned from the grave. Why? Attacking twice is a nice bonus, but for all the cards and effort it takes to bring out, Golden Homunculus and even Gren Maju Daiza, a card introduced outside the archetype, does the job better. But at least you can summon it with a spell or by tributing Thick Helios, right? Lastly, Planet Alignment is a quick play spell card that is Raigeki when you have Helios on the field. It's actually a pretty good card, especially since Helios can be summoned from the deck with Macrocosmos and, oh, I don't know, actually normal summoned. This makes for a very good comeback tool, or even a play disruptor during your opponent's turn. Oh, then it has the 300 burn damage for absolutely no reason. Like, there's no synergy within the archetype, there's nothing that has anything else to do with burn, it just kind of burns for 300. I'll take it. Alright, now to give it a grading scale. In honor of the SAT, we're going to actually not think about that grading scale for a little bit, it's way too real for me. We're going to be using standard letter grades. Consistency. This deck is primarily supporting of the idea of bringing out 500 attack monsters that attack directly, banishing your own cards to power up other monsters to high amounts of attack, and having a specific continuous spell card on the field to do any of this. While there's a way to summon the beasts, Helios and Homunculus from the deck, the fact that the beasts themselves can't be normal summoned really hurts them. The idea of getting Kettle is hard enough, but getting other cards along with it is simply asking too much. Power Ceiling. The most this deck can realistically do is summon a Gorgonic Guardian or 2, or make Golden Homunculus strong enough to win in 1 attack. While the deck itself is terrible in its own win condition, the Man of Gold helps ever so slightly in this regard, as well as nearly monopolizing a great Xyz monster. Relevance. Okay, so let's just forget for a moment that this is an anime archetype and just put it in real life. This deck can't keep up with any current meta deck, especially with MST, Twin Twisters, Galaxy Cyclone, and all the other similar cards running around. That coupled with the fact that it can only win with one card, and you have a deck that won't even top locals. Creativity, and this is where the archetype shines, as having Nami monsters as the entire archetype is something unheard of, as is the empowerment of banishing your own cards. I honestly quite like the fact that every monster has a different attribute and unique look to them, and I feel like it had potential and squandered it. This doesn't really affect the overall rating, but it's a way to look at the positive side. Invulnerability. This deck collapses from any MST clone. This deck kills itself, really. So because you crazy folks out there gave me like, what, 1,000 subscribers just from that one video alone, I guess I gotta make more Dynasties. Yes, I'm ripping off Rada. Yes, the music is from Rogue Galaxy, specifically Swingin', and thank you for the kind words. So, some people were a little miffed that I judged the Alchemy Beasts too harshly because a lot of the cards that I brought up in my discussion were later on in the series and the game as a whole, therefore they should be exempt from any and all comparison. I just want to bring up that if I did that, Link summoning just isn't a thing at all that I talk about. So we'll speak of these cards at their power level at the time and in the current day, just to cover our bases. Now that that's out of the way, they still suck! Today we will be focusing on the ever-popular deck of Reed Pepper from Arc 5, Cookpals. Ah, Arc 5. The only series that could possibly have made this an actual dual synopsis on the Wikia. Reed's expertise within the kitchen allowed him to have a distinct advantage over Yuya within the Chaos Kitchen. This, compounded by the fact Yuya had skipped breakfast, left a tall obstacle for our protagonist to overcome. But fret not, as who would come to save our brave hero but none other than his own dear mother with an improved version of one of Reed's recipes. Insulted by this act, Reed swears to vanquish Yuya, but due to his newfound energy, Yuya is capable of grabbing an action card and ultimately winning the duel. In the general theme of complete insanity, we have sentient food royalty, made to look cute and use effects that return to the hand to stun the opponent by getting rid of their monsters. And then we have Cookpals! Considering my favorite archetype of all time is Madolche, being shown by my first ever profile picture being a hand-drawn pudding cyst, ripping them off is not a quick way into my heart. But hey, Raid Raptors are just rip-offs of Blackwing, so who knows? Maybe it'll turn out to be fun, and you know what the name of the show is. Let's stop beating around the bush. As for our monsters, first up we have Cookpal Cluckwheat, a level 2 Earth Fairy that can be special summoned in attack position when it's bounced back to the hand. While it may be a cuter Mist Valley Thunderbird, it certainly isn't better, as it's significantly weaker in both stat line and use as a fairy for whatever reason. Take my word for it now, this deck is not good at spamming out monsters unless you perform a moon dance in an open field in June, praising RNGesus with all your might. So Icarus Attack would not only make sense with the card's art and physical playstyle along Mist Valley, but be a much-needed, quote, stall for time or comeback card in the deck. Oh, and in case this wasn't inferred already, there are no actual ways the deck can bounce this thing back. It might as well be a super light Viking at this rate, because there aren't even combos to be done with it. Reed only did something because he pulled an action card that bounces and summons another monster from hand, so the writers just took their early lunch break that day, I guess. Next up, we have Cookpal Eggnog. God damn it. Next, we have Cookpal Eggong, a level 1 Earth Fairy that can special summon another copy of itself from the hand or graveyard when it's destroyed. So the only other card I can think of to compare this to is Marsh Macron, and honestly it's a fair note to say there's no objectively better card for every circumstance. While Marsh Macron can pull from the deck as well as the hand or graveyard, it's only a once per turn effect. So 4 attacks are just a poke and a boom, and your opponent got through your defenses. While Eggong is more restricted from where it can summon, it can revive itself infinitely from the graveyard, and has the name that helps, I think, like 3 cards in this archetype. Either way, it's not a bad stalling tool for the deck, especially since Cookpals certainly need a way to make use of their main trap card. More on that later. Cookpal Lie Onion, yes, I had to write it down in the script with a hyphen so I know how to pronounce this and not is an Earth Fairy like all the rest. But this one's level 5. In addition, it has negative protection, as your opponent can only attack Lie Onion, the 200 attack monster, with defense less than Gemini Elf, as a tribute card.
This is a great example of what garbage is. If you're gonna serve us crap like that, then you're really wasting our time. And you guys...
Cookpal Puma Potato is a level 3 monster with a spam effect a la Fuel Cell or Fall Troll, but it's small. While there are quite a few tribute monsters in this deck, No, not that one. There's a much easier way to summon them. No, not pendulums. That mechanic that jump-started new decks, support old ones, and was the entire point of the series these premiered in. No siree. We'll get to that after addressing literally every tribute monster, because they have the same effect. They all have levels between 6 and 10, and defense stats that honestly, they just don't matter. Royal Cookpals, King Burger, Knight Pasta, Prince Curry, Queen Omelette, and Princess Pudding, you fucking plagiarists, have the following effect. If a monster is normal or special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you can target one of those monsters, return this card to the hand, and if you do, destroy that target. Once per turn, you can target one Royal Cookpal monster you control. Double its original attack until the end of this turn. This card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. Okay, so you're expected to spam out increasingly larger and larger monsters, never to be facilitated by in-archetype pendulum support, and you think we're gonna have the time to tribute summon these things that get drop-picked by a fucking mushroom man? Valhalla can only do so much, my dude. Hecature still isn't good. I guess it ain't over until it's over. Let's move on to basically the only saving grace. Or should I say... Sashing gravy! Food puns! Saving grace to the archetype. Oh wait, there's Rabbit's Mayo. With the effect of once per turn, you can target... But JCD, don't you know the people always go monster spells, then traps? Yes, my astute viewer, but like how Alchemy Beasts needed the kettle, the place they were born and the main playmaker of the deck, to be explained first, Cookpals have Food Cemetery, their main playmaker that appears to birth all the Cookpals, ironically. Why is every archetype I cover the same thing? Anyway, Food Cemetery is a continuous trap that basically equips every Cookpal destroyed this turn as an Xyz material. Allows you to search an equal number of them, and will destroy everything on the field when you have more monsters than trap Xyz materials. I see the Battle Beast wasn't alone. Anyway, let's talk about this card as a playmaker. How many Cookpals can you kill in a turn? Draw 3 Eggong and hope your opponent attacks and kills all of them? Crash them into your opponent's monsters and take massive damage? Best case scenario, but not the worst thing to imagine. Unless you don't like dead hands of 3 things that do absolutely nothing. You can always play Grass Infernoids Cookpals? The worst part about it all is that you might get everything blown right up by your opponent giving you a Grinder Golem, or you're restricted in your main way of play just through the fact that you'll have 3 on the field at best, which leads to the big jaw-dropping board of a 1200 attack wimpy boy. You kinda have to run 3, and that's the worst part, because this card only has support in the way of Canning Cuisine, a normal trap card that allows you to add Cookpals underneath the Food Cemetery you control equal to the number of cards your opponent draws, except during the draw phase. Great support for a subpar card, but it may just be what you need for a few other cards we're about to look into. Monster Pie summons a token for your opponent when one of their monsters leaves the field, and it burns the opponent for 1000 when it leaves. Remember when I said that if I didn't bring up Link summoning, I would be not doing my job at reviewing an archetype that kind of needs New Age support? Well, Links are a thing. Ojama Trio got off the list and could honestly come back to 20 per deck and it still wouldn't be used. So why use a more circumstantial, objectively worse version? Maybe now the aforementioned 1200 attack Beefy Boy will be threatening. Ooh, 200 damage followed by another 1000, someone called Trickstars. Metabolic Storm is a normal trap card that states if a monster is popped by the Cookpal effect, it burns the opponent for the attack. So it basically turns them into Volcasaurus. This should be on all the Cookpal monsters, or this should be continuous because the deck has to spend so many resources to get any of the big ones out that I might as well just say that every monster is a self-bouncing Volcasaurus. While we're at it, give them Pendulums. Food Frog is a spell card that searches 2 Royal Cookpals, but they cannot be normal summoned or special summoned that turn. But they can be set! This is a very important idea, I promise you. Set the level 8 tribute monsters. It's a +1 searcher with a stipulation that makes it only great and not amazing. So using this in Food Frog can hopefully remove so many Cookpals from your deck that you forget you're playing them at all. In all honesty though, this card certainly is a 3-up in any build of Cookpals through boosting consistency and general card advantage. Minute Meal is a spell card that allows you to summon Cookpal monsters from your hand with levels less than or equal to the levels of monsters your opponent controls. Considering link ratings are a thing, as well as Xyz ranks, and all your beefy boys are, well, high level and not at all beefy, despite the name. They're more sweet, now that you mention it. Run 1 and see how it works. Regal Recipes is a spell that allows you to summon all of the Cookpals from your hand up to the number of Cookpals underneath the Food Cemetery you control. Oh, but that's not all. You also get to burn your opponent for 300 for each special summon monster, to keep in the practice of, burn, I guess. And that's basically it for the archetype. I know it was a long-awaited sequel to my most popular video, but I really wanted to just pump out some Cookpal stuff because, oh my god, these things are beyond terrible. Here's a sample deck list that focuses more on Cookpals in and of themselves. Here's another deck list that allows you to use That Grass Looks Greener to basically mill all your Cookpals and try to make a big boy food cemetery, and maybe you shoot out some other Cookpals. Not exactly certain how you'd be able to do that very consistently, but hey, it's the best we could really do. And essentially, that's about it for Cookpals. I'm going to be making a video actually showing off some duels with them if you guys want, if you guys really want this. And in either case, I would love to be taking requests for any other anime archetypes that you guys think are so bad they could be on this. Thank you guys for watching. If you wouldn't mind smashing that like button and also subscribing for more Dynasty of the Useless content, as it's something that I like doing and I haven't done in a while, so might as well get back to that. And oh man, it's the third video in the series that everyone accuses me of ripping off from Rada. It's Dynasty time! We might as well get into a deck I predicted would exist literally a day before they got revealed. The Battlewasps. Battlewasps, also known as B-Force in Japan, were the deck of Shinji Weber from the Synchro dimension of Arc 5, aka Crow's friend, who everyone hated because he was a little too happy with the pitchforks and torches and going all French Revolution on the city of New Domino. Battlewasps are, as a concept, wind insect monsters based on wasps in terms of their shapes, with their names coming from piercing weapons and archery. Their playstyle boils down to swarming and a focus on burn effects to fill in what they cannot do alone while stacking the graveyard for effects and swarms. In the end, however, they come out more as Diet Blackwings with an insect typing in a series that gave us their Xyz cousins in Raid Raptors already. With Shinji having a grand total of 4 duels where he lost 2 and won 2, the archetype surely has some cards that were oh, who am I kidding? I'm just joshing you. They're garbage. The writers love Crow so much they just made him again 3 times in the same series, and just wanted him to look much better than they actually were. Heck, those wins were against Moon Shadow, the Twilight Ninja dude, and Sector Security Grunts that don't even have the decency to have names. That's definitely not helping Shinji's case here. Let's kick things off with a level 4 monster that starts the chain of pure liquid ass. Arbalest, the Rapid Fire, is a level 4 wind insect with 1800 attack and 800 defense with the following effect. If this card is destroyed, you can special summon one Battlewasp, Arbalest the Rapid Fire, from your hand. That's, Well, it would be considered circumstantial even when Flying Kamakiri was introduced. This excludes every other monster in the archetype from its swarming capability, pun intended, except for itself, and it's only from the hand. The main problem with this is that having to wait for battle destruction via Flying Kamakiri is absurdly slow now, and that's for literally anything else in this deck from the deck. This thing is only capable of summoning itself from the hand. I really can't stress how incredibly inconsequential this effect is, and it's named after a crossbow so huge it looks like it revs its engine in residential areas. Look at this shit! It looks like you could impale a whole family, and this overcompensating gnat has a scoop for a stinger? It's just disappointing in every way. Next we have Twinbow the Attacker, with 2 stingers and, 4 legs? Did he give up the other 2 legs for the extra stinger? Can all insects make this trade? Like 4 stingers and no legs? Is this how spiders were made? Does it die if 1 stinger comes out or both? No wait, this thing's a wasp. I think that's just bees? Yeah, that's probably just bees. Anyway, Twinbow the Attacker is a level 3 wind insect monster with 1000 attack and 500 defense, and the following effect. You can special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way, the following effect is negated. This card can make a second attack during each battle phase. Well, at least it's named fittingly. I'll give it this, that it does have the best use so far out of the main deck monsters, with it being really easy to summon and swarm out onto the field in a synchro or a link play. Let's call this a step in the right direction then, shall we? Not only does it do what Blackwings do, which is special summoning to the field with convenient levels to help with synchro plays, but it also has a secondary effect for versatility. Albeit the effect won't be useful in most circumstances, but it's better than nothing, especially when it's coming off an archetypical Gillosaurus with no downside. Now, if we only could figure out why this thing is so eager to die. But does it die? Is destruction death, or is it just kind of like that one Void in Chrono Trigger where they just kind of wait to be brought back? Has the graveyard become a stop and not a destination? Okay, if I keep going, my heart's gonna stop and my brain's gonna leak. I don't like this thing questioning my mortality. Coming off that good B is this deck's only main deck tuner monster, in a Synchro archetype, and it's Sting the Poison, as well as looking like a living vessel for Pepto-Bismol addicts, is a level 2 tuner with 400 attack and 800 defense, and he has the following effect. You contribute one Battlewasp monster, then target one monster your opponent controls. That target's effects are negated until the end of this turn. Not the worst effect, but not good by modern standards, or even a decade out standards. A simple breakthrough skill effect at the cost of one of your wasps. So, even if it didn't require you giving up a monster in a deck that has a swarming capability of an anthill after a run-in with the poisonous gas fairy, this effect is so incredibly outclassed and not what the deck needs. We have a level 12 Synchro, which, don't worry, we will get to, and the best way to summon it is to just place Synchrons and ignore the rest of the deck entirely. Okay, let's look at it from the perspective of it just being a tuner. Burning Abyss was fine with their tuner being the Train to Virgil station and nothing else, but can this deck afford to have the luxury of a tuner that doesn't do anything but tune? If there's any suspense, look at the only adjective in the title of this video and reevaluate your thought process. Oh boy, next is a card many should be familiar with for how powerful it is. Pin the Bullseye is a level 1 Wind Disgrace with 200 attack and 300 defense, with the grandiose effect of, you can inflict 200 damage to your opponent once per turn. Woohoo! Now we have Sparks damage! Where did burn come into this, you may ask? Every anime archetype needs burn, guys! We have to make sure that the main protagonist has some way to have low life points so that there's suspense as to how he can beat over an otherwise negligible bard! Don't you know what storytelling is? Must I read from the hero's journey to you until you realize that we operate under a strict formula with no room for deviation or experimentation? All this runt does is add on 200 burn, which is nothing of note, even with the help of a card coming up later that increases burn damage. He's a name, a face, and nothing more than fodder. What an absolute train wreck of a bug. Especially since he's named after something your grandmother uses to sew you a new blanket, as opposed to the Absolute Charm Armrest! The final main deck monster we'll be taking a look at is the level 1 monster Dart the Hunter. Dart is a little guy who is not only barreling towards the earth to get the sweet embrace of death, but is also a level 1 wind insect with 100 stats both ways, and states the following. If a Battlewasp monster you control destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack the destroyed monster had on the field. So Dart is actually kind of decent. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it does have its own niche as a Flame Wingman sort of add-on to Battlewasps who did battle. AKA the Synchros, if we're being honest here. And it does give at least a buff with another of our cards coming up soon. Something you may have noticed with the main deck additions is that there appears to be no sense of cohesion between them. They can kind of swarm, almost never recur, deal enough damage to make you think they were mosquitoes and not wasps, and then there's a battle trap? No real strategy or win condition is possible so far, and yes, I know we're only looking at the main deck cards in the Synchro archetype, but look at something like Burning Abyss. Great effects that are easy to get off, and you get the idea immediately that they need to be sent to the graveyard, and cards that do that are good, even without looking into the myriad of extra deck cards that help them do this. If that's too good of a deck as an example, we can talk about Mech Lords. At least you know they all hate Synchros and want them to be absorbed as fast as possible, and the archetype gives you some ways of popping your own cards to summon your main boss monsters, albeit the options do leave a lot to be desired. This? No idea what the Synchros could do from only looking at the main deck. If I did a grading scale and I added cohesion as a category, it would be a solid F. But what are the Synchros, you may ask? Well, onto the extra deck, which starts to show some of the signs of potential, but signs that lead into a ditch only lead to death. First up is the Synchro Tuner monster. Ooh, this is interesting. Aw man, are we about to see some Oxel Synchron levels of playmaking? Maybe just a useful effect like Formula, or will it? Oh yeah, this thing exists! Azusa the Ghost Bow is a level 5 generic Synchro tuner with 2200 attack and 1600 defense with the following effect. During either player's turn, if a Battlewasp monster would inflict effect damage while you control another Battlewasp monster, you can double that damage. This card makes Pin the Hit into not just Sparks, but half of an Ukazi. It's almost Hinotama. Hey! Maybe Pin the Hit is still the most brain-dead awful card I've ever thought of, but slightly less secure in that top spot. Solid stats, but the effect straight up doesn't work with anything but that abomination. The decent hand trap made into something that burns for like 3k off a single discard circumstantially and by battle of all things. And another Synchro, and good luck getting him out. Before I get ahead of myself, this thing has just too few uses, and is outclassed by 2 of the Tech Genus monsters in almost every way. I hope I never say that again, just for the sake of my health. Next is Halberd the Charge. Come on, they even took a Tech Genus name! You're just stealing from everywhere now, aren't you, Battlewasps? You better not have a continuous spell that your entire deck is based off of, or I swear to God! Halberd is a level 6 generic Synchro with 2500 attack and 800 defense, and has the following effect. If this card attacks an opponent's monster with higher attack than this card, that monster's attack becomes half its current attack during damage calculation only. So it's a beat stick to beat over other beat sticks? How anime of you, why don't we just break out the infinite attack smack? In all seriousness, this is just an excuse to get out of big attack monsters through battle, which is probably the most counterintuitive way to do it, as well as the way that gets punished more easily than spamming Scorpion's teleport on any given Thursday. Utopia the Lightning exists, and is better in nearly every way, from being splashable to not needing extreme setup beforehand to maybe actually killing the thing that needs to die. It's like a parachute with a 78% chance of opening, and this deck wears that parachute and says the rest were riddled with lice, what could we do? Moving right along, we have the secondary boss of the deck, the powerful Hama the Conquering Bow. Hama is a level 8 Wind Insect Synchro with 2800 attack and 2000 defense that requires a Synchro Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Battlewasps to summon. As for the effect, this card can make a second attack during each battle phase. Once per turn, if this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls. That target loses attack equal to the battle damage inflicted until the end of the battle phase. At the end of your battle phase, if no battle damage was inflicted, you can inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each Battlewasp monster in your graveyard. Cool, so you can summon Sting into Twin Bow, then Synchro for Sousa, then use another Twin Bow in your hand to Synchro for this big boy. That's it, that's really all you have to do. At least, well, links are still a thing we might as well bring up. With links, the combo would be more along the lines of using up resources for a Link 2, probably Great Fly or the Insector Link, depending, and then doing this play. There are easier ways, but they just involve run Twin Bow and Synchro spam for no reason. While the effect can be strong to use in certain situations, with a Sousa combined with a card we got coming up soon, there's way too much you need to focus on in order to make this thing in the vacuum that is called the anime duels, let alone actually playing the thing in real life. You can basically look at the effect in one of 2 ways. Either the deck wants to be versatile and understanding with an effect for damage and no damage, or it could be anti-synergy within the exact same card. This isn't Helios Duomegistus levels of screwing the entire deck over, but it does synergize with either nothing or the Synchro Tuner you theoretically just used for the summon. If you go for this big guy, I'd say try focusing on turboing him and maybe an Azusa for added burn. Teching in a Soul Charge against a little Timmy that doesn't know it's actually banned. Finally, it's the biggest, the baddest wasp of them all! If you get stung by him, you'll probably need at least a bandage, and you may say a curse word when it happens from the unimaginable pain! Ballista the Armageddon is a level 12 Synchro, with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, that only requires a tuner and 1 or more non-tuners! Oh, wait, that's actually pretty welcome compared to the insanity of making Hama. As for the effect, during either player's turn, you can banish all Battlewasp monsters from your graveyard, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. It loses 500 attack and defense for each monster banished this way. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Alright, now we have an actual boss monster on our hands. Regular viewers may also recognize this monster as number 10 on the list of best Synchro monsters, and for good reason. Given how generic it is to summon and the power to banish and weaken a monster to blast right through it, it stands out compared to Mr. Burn and Pass. Now, instead of using the graveyard for burn, just chuck them bugs out and bring in the big artillery. Wait, is the thing just smashing the rotting bodies of his brethren into a cannon and firing them at people? Oh god, he's a worse monster than I'd ever imagined. I don't even mean monster like card type, I mean the kind you read about on the news and you feel good you don't live in the same state as such an evil being. Yeesh. Honestly, its biggest sin besides, well, grave robbing and corpse desecration, is the fact that you need plenty of resources to be useful, and links to get higher leveled materials for easier summons. Hell, in the show itself, Shinji needed Halberd, Arbalest, and Sting to make it himself via... Wait, this dude really just ran urgent tuning? Oh my god, the Synchro dimension is so weird! Synchro spam became somewhat of a dead archetype in Master Rule 4, and Ballista shows what that can do to an archetype.
They wouldn't be good pre-Link era, don't get me wrong. But if the mighty can fall, what happens to the unworthy? Moving along to the spells and traps, and he only has 2 of each. Well, compared to Cookpals, this is pretty, simple for me, to say the least. Though let's not make assumptions until we see what these bugs are packing in the hive first now, shall we? First of those spells being Summoning Swarm, a normal spell card with the following effect. If your opponent controls a monster, special summon level 4 or lower Battlewasps monsters from your graveyard, equal to the number of monsters your opponent controls. Why do cards need to be made with the intention of being bonkers in every deck that isn't the one it's printed in? If this was printed for Infernities or even Yang Zings, it would be a nightmare, but instead it summons back these doofuses. It isn't up to, mind you, it has to be exact, so that alone makes it brick a bit, but otherwise, it's an alright archetypical Soul Charge. An alright Soul Charge makes for a good card in my book, so hey, we got something solid besides Twin Bow and Big Boy. Revival Swarm is a protection monster reborn. No, seriously, its effect reads as such. Target 1 Battlewasp monster in your graveyard. Special summon it, but its effects are negated. Also, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. It's actually pretty okay. What else can I say other than play a monster reborn in addition to it? It can get back your synchros for play extensions, and essentially holds the archetype together. A natural fit into any Battlewasp deck. Run 3 and never look back. So that's 2 for 2 in terms of good spells, but how do the traps compare? Well, next we have up Naturia Sacred Tree strapped to the sky and defying all known laws of aviation. It's Battlewasp Nest. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it is. It's a continuous trap with the following effect. Activate this card by targeting 1 level 2 or lower Battlewasp monster you control. If that target, or a monster with the same name as that target, is targeted for an attack, you can special summon 1 monster with the same name from your hand or deck. And if you do, end the battle phase. If this effect is used 2 times, destroy this card. If that target leaves the field, destroy this card. So... a negate attack trap that's actually better than its origin, but more like that trap Tenzin ran in 5Ds called Totem Pole. The anime sure broke the mold with this one. Isn't that right, Battle Eater? Granted, there are still plenty of flaws. Namely, it only works on the level 2 tuner, and, well, pin and dart. And you don't exactly want either of those on the field. Hell, the show uses this card as a means of getting multiple pins on the board for the Pinpricks of Doom, combined with Azusa for the burn boost. Of course it did! If your primary way of spamming onto the board is to base your entire playstyle around waiting a turn and hoping for your opponent to be brain dead, there's something wrong with the fact that it's kind of applause-worthy in this deck by comparison. Lastly on the chopping block for today is the continuous trap B formation, which is striking an infinity to flaunt its power. No, that's actually not what's going on at all. B formation has the following effect. Activate this card by targeting 1 Battlewasp monster you control. Each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster, that target gains 400 attack. If that target leaves the field, destroy this card. Needless to say, this card is hot and steaming garbage, just ready to be served up on a plate. Your opponent can play around this way too easily. It's insignificant for almost any of the cards in the archetype, and it's an incredibly weak boost at that. Don't run the deck at all, but if you do, don't run this card in it. I'm more than happy with the idea of somehow spamming your opponent's side of the field with Ojama Trio and beefing up your small boys to at least have sharper stingers, but the card doesn't work that way. If it did, I would say run 1 just for the sake of playing around with it and having fun, but since it doesn't, it's better off just going into a 100-card lot you can sell on eBay. By that I mean have different cards, don't just sell 100 of these, you monster. And that basically wraps up the archetype. This deck is just plain horrid. This abortion of a deck tries to masquerade itself as a more powerful deck, and while it has some good cards for that purpose, there is just way too little utility and very, very little power. Even though it has a level 12 synchro, granted it can't even summon it. It's kinda sad, since I kinda relate to the archetype. With nowhere to go and no one to play with, this deck doesn't know what to do. Whether that be protect, burn, or help others, as there's no fulfillment. All in all, trying to find a place in this cruel world. They were given new life by the real-life printings of their cards, and who knows? Maybe this can be some kid's favorite deck, just because he really likes insects and he likes to collect a little ant farm going on in his room. And he thinks it's cool that they're all named after some pretty rad weapons. Maybe they can have a home. Well, it's the Dynasty of the Useless everyone's been asking for at least one part of.
I'm sorry for the delay with the Hydradrive video taking so long to make due to its size and how much work I'm putting into it. Just to make the intro scene perfect, let alone the rest of the video proper, because lord, have you seen the size of that archetype? But for now, before we enter the ocean of Season 2's worst deck by far, let's take a dip first into Season 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains for some small sets of bad archetypes, just to have a nice surprise appetizer before the main course. So during the Tower of Hanwei arc in Vrains, Mr. Yusaku the Playmaker had to partner with Aoi, aka Blue Angel, and Go Onizuka in order to take down some members of the Knights of Hanwei, in order to get to the tower and stop Revolver from accomplishing his terroristic deeds. One of the knights fought was Revolver's second-in-command, Spectre, who is debatably one of, if not the best character in Vrains, and has an interesting deck to boot. Plus, he's a recurring duelist, so we'll have to save him for another series down the JSD Gatto pipeline. But as for the other three knights shown, those people were Dr. Genome, Byra, and Faust. A trio of lieutenants in Hanwei, just below Spectre in rank, who each had a very small archetype that were immediately forgotten due to how underwhelming they were. Helix, with their cool design and wasted execution. Dark Mummy, with their lacking monsters, and the only reason they were used was because of virus traps anyway. And Motor Worms, with use only as an engine to existing insect decks, unable to prop themselves up properly. These three archetypes only really set the stage for more and more weird archetypes in the run of Vrains, but sometimes that can be a blessing. I mean, when you start off Season 3 with Allure Queen support, you are definitely off your rocker to some degree. With that said, welcome to the first Dynasty of the Useless triple feature, as we'll be going over these three sets one at a time, and judging just how bad these decks really are, and what real-life techs one could use to make them work. Y'all know the drill by now, it's Dynasty time! To start in order of appearance, let's cover the first lieutenant scene in the show, that being Dr. Genome. Genome uses the Helix archetype, a tremendously small fiend archetype based on DNA and mutants, made up of 2 main deck monsters, 2 links, a spell, and a trap. In concept, this is quite the interesting deck if you only consider Deoxys your favorite Pokemon from being swirly and nothing else, but the execution is exactly that. It's a public execution. This stems primarily from the main deck only being made up of 2 level 5 fiends with a situational revival spell, and not much else to say. So let's see what went wrong in the splicing process with the first card of the deck, Helix Marmotroll. Marmotroll is a level 5 Dark Fiend with 2600 attack and 0 defense with the following effects. If there are no monsters on the field, you can normal summon this card without tributing by sending 1 Helix card from your hand to the graveyard. The first time you would take battle damage from an attack involving this card each turn, you do not. The main issue here is that Marmotroll needs no monsters period on the field to be summoned without tribute, and even then he still needs a Helix card sent from the hand to be cheated out in a very fair and slow way. While he can be cheated out through Mausoleum of the Emperors, as well as Sinister Yorishiro and the Monarch Stormforth, do you really want to waste such cards just for this? It's more along the lines of trying to fix your problem of running out of pencil lead by owning a graphite refinery. You're doing too much for too little. That's really the main issue in a nutshell. This deck needs outside support to even do the basic plays, especially if forced to go second. If Marmotroll was given a better effect to summon itself, then maybe it could see a lot of use for being a dark equivalent of Galaxy Soldier. But otherwise, this is a card better off taken out of the gene pool. Next is Helix Dreadrat, another level 5 Dark Fiend with 1200 attack and 2000 defense, with the following effects. If you control a Link monster in the extra monster zone, you can normal summon this card without tributing. If this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect of Helix Dreadrat once per turn. You cannot normal summon or set the turn you activate this effect. The main problem with both of these monsters is that you can read through their effects and feel as if they were going to be better than they actually are. If you control a Link, you might as well just summon this thing from hand inherently, right? It's basically a Gilasaurus at that point, but you can tack on sending a Helix from your hand to the graveyard on this thing and not Marmotroll if that would make it seem more balanced, especially considering it can revive itself from the grave easily. Well, easily revive itself once per turn, get banished when it's linked away, and limits your normal summoning and setting for that turn, essentially cutting off access to literally the only other monster in the main deck, but it revives itself nonetheless. The idea of having to normal summon your big tribute cards kind of only works now with cards like the New Age Monarchs, and that's with literal years of support and an incredible structure deck propping them up. This has 6 cards. Well, that was the card reviewing equivalent of chemotherapy, but how did the links fare? Surprisingly well, if you forget the tiny little detail that you need the above cards to even summon them, but let's see if they make the trip worth it. Helix Gothic Clone is the first link of the archetype and is a Link 2 Dark Fiend monster with arrows going up and down, 0 attack, and the summoning requirement of 2 Helix monsters. These are its effects. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, this card's attack becomes equal to the attack of that face-up opponent's monster until the end of this turn. The first time this card would be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not destroyed. If this effect is applied, after damage calculation,
you can tribute one monster this card points to. Inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack the tributed monster had on the field. As stated before, the main issue is that the links take specifically the Helix monsters to make, so it really puts into question just how useful they are. While they can be solid in the effects department, when the only way to get materials is through 2 level 5 fiends that make Garbage Lord regret his choice in name, you aren't going to be turning any heads. Apart from this, Gothic Clone is fine as a standalone monster, as he's kind of a Link U-Bell, given it clashes and burns back damage by that of a monster it points to. It's a decent start to the links, which is a shame given the fact that there isn't much else to go off of. Helix Necro Darwin is also a Link 2 Dark Fiend monster with arrows going up and to the left, 1800 attack, and the summoning condition of 2 Helix monsters to make. Its effect states, your opponent's monsters cannot target this co-linked card for attacks. If this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card to a zone a Link monster points to. When your opponent activates a card or effect that would inflict damage to you, quick effect, you can make that damage to you 0, then this card's attack becomes double its original attack until the end of this turn. Archetype locked or not, this card is one of the most ridiculous ideas in the middle of Link format one could have. If you remember Firewall Dragon, you remember easy loops with Cannon Soldier to beat your opponent in a single turn. Now imagine this card constantly reviving itself just because you have any Link monster with a half-decent arrow. You can recreate Frog FTK without the frogs. Incredible! Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is possibly one of the worst series for deck building the franchise has ever seen, considering there were 2 people with cards that could easily infinitely loop their opponent for game, and neither of them ever stopped to think, wait, where does it say once per turn on this card? Once again though, it's archetype locked, and, as I have surely bashed into your heads by now, Marmo and Dreadrat are just garbage. This isn't even a perk to the archetype, having such a broken link, as it could be used with dangers, 3 Dreadrat to use the normal summon and the graveyard resurrection effects, and a Cannon Soldier. If consistency sounds like an issue, you can just have Saryuja and your problems are no more. It's like saying Toons were meta because Toon Cannon Soldier was a part of consistent FTK, or saying your entire family is smart because your big sister went through college. That's just not how any of this works. Helix cards are awful with one good egg, and by that I mean viable and not of moral quality. When it comes to talking about the spells, we can't as there is only one. When it comes to talking about spell, however, we can certainly. And quickly at that. Graveyard Incubation is the only spell of this archetype, a normal spell card with the following effect. Target 2 Helix monsters in your graveyard with the same name. Special summon them, but change their attack and defense to 0. They have their effects negated, they cannot attack or be tributed. Also, they cannot be used as material for a summon, except the link summon of a Helix monster. You can only activate 1 Graveyard Incubation per turn. Oh yeah, this card gets the hard ones per turn, huh? Graveyard Incubation is such a heavily limited card given it negates the effects, has to be 2 Helix of the same name, makes stats non-existent, but who cares about that when it's just an easy way to get out your spammy Link Darwin? It's terrible if you want to do literally anything else, but it makes for the only good card in this deck, so it's an instant 3-up for dedicated FTK builds. As for the trap card, well, Regeneration Cure is a normal trap with the following effect. When your opponent activates a card or effect that would inflict damage to you, make that damage to you 0, then special summon 1 Helix token. If you go against most decks, this does nothing. Against Trickstars, you will die, but at least you will have little buddies on the field to watch you burn. If this was a continuous, it would be bad, but as a normal trap card, this is embarrassing and a great way to sum up the entire archetype. Awful. So, final thoughts on Helix. The deck has a solid concept in terms of pitched idea, but the way it goes about doing this makes it seem like links existed in 2006. They are heavily reliant on going first and praying to get a Marmotrol in the opening hand, or getting a card to circumvent its awful summoning condition. But even then, this deck fails to do anything aside from FTK in the same boring way we saw from Firewall, so there isn't even originality here. If the deck was more based on level 4s with the same effects as the actual monsters shown, if it didn't have the infinitely reviving Link fodder, this entry would have been a lot more positive. Maybe it wouldn't have even made it onto the show. However, there's only one card worth thinking of here, and it would be banned immediately if it was in real life. It's a shame, because the artwork in this archetype is pretty neat, and I do like the idea of DNA as an archetype. But there wasn't even an idea of evolution, or splitting into multiples, or anything here that would symbolize DNA. It's just a cobbled together mess of flavor fails loosely based on mutants that fail in the end of the day. And now, from the most useless of the trio, to the one with the most potential to be terrifying to face against. Which is like saying we're going from Ebola to the Plague, but that's where we are right now. We come to the Dark Mummies! Dark Mummy is the archetype belonging to Clarissa Turner, also known as Byra. The theme of this deck is using virus traps in order to stun assets of the opponent's deck and turn their benefits against them. Of course, kind of hard to do when your deck does so little upon the idea, but the prospect of new virus trap cards scares me given we have Lair of Darkness and all the shenanigans their field spell has caused. Byra's main opponent was Aoi and her Trickstars, to which she did manage to hold her own until Aoi flipped the table. Last thing before we get to her cards, Byra has some of the funkiest cards ever shown as random fodder and it's hilarious. She runs Temple of the Kings for her virus traps, as well as cards like Infected Male, Giant Germ, and Ikibio Drakmord, from what we are shown as she discarded them. I have no clue what these cards could be doing to help her, considering they all just seem to be flavor. Anyway, let's get into the monsters. Dark Mummy Probe is the first monster, a level 1 Dark Zombie monster with 700 attack and 0 defense with the following effect. If a card is in the field spell zone, you can special summon this card from your hand, then destroy one card in the field zone. Probe is kind of situational, and yet it's a decent counter to field spell users. Note that if there are no monsters on the field, it does work as a Mystic Mind counter, funnily enough, as it does activate in the hand and then summons and pops. Sure, they can chain Ojamatrio, but mine still dies, so whatever, your deck can function again. It's funny how completely silly, irrelevant cards are getting noticed just because they counter the mine. It's like Necro's side decks all over again. Nothing else more to say here, as it's kinda basic otherwise, and it was used by Byra in order to get rid of Light Stage exclusively. Next is Dark Mummy Infuser, another level 1 Dark Zombie with 0 attack and 500 defense with the following effects. If this card is normal or special summoned to a zone a Zombie Link monsters points to, you can target one of those Zombie Link monsters. While this card is face-up in the main monster zone, that monster is unaffected by trap effects. Your opponent's monsters cannot target this linked card for attacks. Infuser is not the best, as all it does is make your Zombie Link immune to virus traps, including your own. However, for what it does, it's a solid monster. Could have used a special summon condition, then it would have been a much better example of something you could actually use in this deck. As it stands, you still run 3 given what we're building up towards, so that's how you know we only have the best of the best selection when trap protection is an absolute staple. Dark Mummy Surgical Forceps is the boss of the archetype, being a Link 3 Dark Zombie, with 2400 attack and arrows going up, right, and bottom left, requiring 3 Dark Mummy monsters to make, and has the following effects. Gains 300 attack for each monster it points to. When you draw a trap cards, you can reveal one of them, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Once per turn, if a monster is normal summoned, special summoned, or set to a zone an opponent's Link monster points to, quick effect, you can destroy that monsters. Forceps is cool and all, but the issue comes from its materials, and the effects are not helped by its arrows. Your opponent can basically just not summon to that specific zone for a while, until they have their negation set up, and then proceed to not worry about Forceps. The burn is cute and may have some loop with it, but I couldn't find anything consistent in testing. You need a specific spell we'll cover next, or the case of 3 Probe in hand to pop a field spell on both sides, and then normal summon one just to bring it out. Honestly, the biggest hurt comes from a lack of Dark Mummy monsters in general. Otherwise, it's a decent link, albeit under-supported as a result. Monster Restitch is the only spell we'll be talking about, and it's a normal spell with the following effect. Tribute 1 Dark Mummy monster. Special summon 3 Dark Mummy tokens. Alright, that one was clean and simple. Restitch is such a strong token gen spell, it almost holds this deck together. Tributing 1 for 3 tokens in a game where tokens grew a lot in strength is impressive, alongside no downsides like that of Scapegoat. As well, there is the fact that it's not once per turn, so you can turn 1 Dark Mummy into 5 tokens with 2 Restitch in hand, as well as turn that single Dark Mummy into a sizable board in the end. Always run 3 in a Dark Mummy deck, maybe just play a deck you want to play anyway and tech in a Mind Destroyer in this, see how that works. Now we're into the viruses, and I'm almost excited! Current Corruption Virus is a normal trap with the following effect. Tribute 1 Dark Monster with 0 defense. Until your opponent's 3rd end phase after activation, change the attack of all monsters your opponent controls with 2000 or less defense to 0. They have their effects negated, also monsters in your opponent's hand cannot activate their effects. Current Corruption is a strong virus trap, given it hits decks where it hurts with no hand traps for those 3 turns, and monsters of 2000 or less defense getting their effects negated. Not to mention the lair has plenty of 0 defense monsters to benefit from. It's ridiculous, and it's powerful. What else more is there to say? You should run this thing in a virus-centric deck list. And even here, just because your tokens have 0 defense and you can stop your deck from dying to hand traps, at least for a little while. Root Ransom Virus is also a normal trap card with the following effect. Tribute 1 Dark Monster with 0 attack. Change the attack of all Link monsters on the field to 0, also they have their effects negated. Each time a Link monster is Link summoned while this card is in your graveyard, change the attack of all Link monsters on the field to 0, also they have their effects negated. During your opponent's 2nd end phase after this card was sent to the graveyard, banish it. Root Ransom is just as powerful as Current, although harder to get off in an actual lair deck without using the lair effect for making random 0 attack monsters you have into darks. Otherwise, the fact is, this leaves such a curse on Link monsters it's insane. Not to mention Root Ransom is bugged on Percy to sometimes affect players for the entire duel. It's hilarious to mess around with, and I definitely run this in a lair deck looking to troll. No joke, this card would straight up be used in our current meta, and would probably be a card that gets hit on the ban list, depending on how hard this card is abused against basically any deck ever made. What do Salamangreats do against this thing? Wait? So, final thoughts on Dark Mummy, and I guess Virus as well. The Dark Mummy archetype, as stated before, definitely has potential behind it, but sadly has plenty more issues. The main issue is that the 3 Dark Mummy monsters we have are 2 weak level 1 monsters, and a Link 3 that just needs 1 spell that's unsearchable to actually properly summon it, with better options for Link summons, moving it from cute to never seeing play. For anyone who wishes to give these a whirl on Dueling Book or something through customs, you have a solid base with them being zombies, as well as Lair of Darkness, can work to hilarious degrees with the virus traps, which were more brought up to make sure we had enough to talk about, as they are not bad cards, just not exactly a part of Dark Mummy. However, what holds it back is the lack of their own cards, given the set is 4 cards if we take out the viruses. I'd also enjoy seeing these fully developed, given that we have plenty of mummy-based cards, but never a full-on archetype of them, unless you want to bring up a few Umbral Horrors. Now that we've unwrapped these cadavers, let's enter the nest of the Motor Worms! Finally, we come to Yusaku's opponent of the trio, the man known as Aso in real life and Faust in the virtual world. Motor Worm is a very unique light insect archetype, to be quite honest, and it's pretty fun regardless of the many issues that we'll get into. The main drawback is being reliant on certain cards in a quote-unquote pure Motor Worm deck, just for it to function. But when it gets going, it can be a force to be reckoned with. So let's get started with a Link monster. Yep, there's no main deck here. So pure is not a word we can use to describe this deck, probably. Motor Worm Spreader Queen is a Link 3 light insect with 1000 attack, arrows going left, bottom left, and down, and requires 2 or more insect monsters to make with the following effects. Gain 700 attack for each insect monster on the field. Once per turn, if this card does not point to a monster, quick effect, you can special summon 1 Motor Worm token to your zone this card points to. Your opponent's monsters cannot target Motor Worm tokens for attacks. So this is probably one of the weirder starts to an archetype. Yes, there are no Motor Worm main deck monsters. Instead, Faust uses a few cards we will see coming up to make tokens for Spreader Queen. I guess including Spreader Queen herself. Thankfully, though, it's generic in terms of an insect link, so you can plug it in any kind of main insect deck out there. Go nuts with Insectors or turn Ballpark into an OTK deck. As for the effect, it doesn't seem to do much on the surface. Spawns a token and gains attack. However, the support cards are what brings this queen to be a strong monster in the end. Oh, you thought there was any more? Nope, it's just spells and traps from here. Woohoo! Wormhole Defense is a continuous spell with the following effects. When this card is activated, special summon 1 Motor Worm token in defense position. If this card in the spell and trap card zone and/or an insect-type monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy 1 Motor Worm token you control instead. Your opponent cannot tribute insect monsters they control, nor use them as materials for a Link summon. So here's the first card Faust used for the Motor Worms, and what can I say? It's a token gen on activation, and it's protection by sacking your tokens. As well, that part at the end. Your opponent cannot tribute insect monsters they control, nor use them as materials for a Link summon. Remember when I brought up the idea of purity not being a thing? Well, you need DNA surgery. That's the end-all be-all. The payoff for this is a more competent version of zone blocking that Ojama's tried by blocking zones with tokens that cannot be used for links, which is the main out to Ojama Trio and do on field effects anyway. Of course, it does have the issues of not accounting for synchros or fusions, but it's the Vrains era in Season 1, so other extract methods were not common until Season 2, so the writers just decided not to care about them. Despite this, Defense is a great card and should be run at 3 in this deck. But 1 token isn't enough to make the queen, so let's move on into Motor Worm Bait, a normal spell with the following effect. If you control an insect monster, special summon 2 Motor Worm tokens. You cannot normally special summon level 3 or 4 monsters the turn you activate this card. Little specific, but otherwise, it's just Worm Bait, but the tokens are light. Nothing much more to say, given it helps get tokens for Spreader Queen to get buffs and summon it. Running at the same intervals as Worm Bait itself, the card might as well just say, oh, Worm Bait, again. Motor Worm Gate is the last spell of this set and is a continuous spell card with the following effect. Once per turn, if all face-up monsters your opponent controls are insect type, minimum 1, you can target 1 insect monster you control, it can attack directly. Probably the most situational card in the set, Gate feels like a bygone mechanic of the GX era. Of course, this also ties into the Ojama idea of blocking the opponent with tokens galore to go for a big swing directly with Queen. Fun note in this is that it's a permanent buff to the monster targeted, so it's pretty strange as a result, especially for DNA surgery hilarity. Run 1 or 2 if you want to have some fun here and there, but it's completely unnecessary if you just want to do some Link spam and hope for the best anyway. You might as well just run Fairy Meteor Crush. Egg Clutch is a continuous trap with the following effects. If an insect monster, or monsters, is special summoned to your field, you can target 1 monster in your opponent's main monster zone. Change it to face-up defense position, and if you do, it becomes insect type. Also, it has its effects negated. While this card is face up on the field, that monster cannot change its battle position. When that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. Once per turn, you contribute 1 insect monster, special summon up to 2 motor worm tokens to your opponent's field in defense position. So Egg Clutch is where the big plays come in for the zone blocking. You use this trap in order to block the opponent's monsters via summoning your own tokens to negate their effects, and make them insects that Queen gains from and can attack directly over. Sadly, it does not work for Lynx, but otherwise, pretty neat form of stun. As well, tribute one of your own insects to get 2 blocking tokens on their end. It's great. I'd run this as 3 as its core part of the Motor Worm playstyle. A finicky and unstable playstyle, but hey, we actually kind of see where this one's going, so that's a Swiss flag for you. Our final Motor Worm card, and the end of this set, is Worm Revival, a normal trap with the following effects. Target 1 Link 3 or lower insect Link monster in your graveyard. Special summon it, and if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. Also, you can special summon 1 Motor Worm token to your zone it points to. Worm Revival is decent, but slow and situational form of revival. You use this in order to get back Queen to a main monster zone for the stun with Egg Clutch, as well as spawning another token that you can sack for more blocks on the opponent's side. As well, it does have uses as a revival for other insect links, and spawning a token as a new material, which is perfect for Giant Ballpark if they want to get their Pikafina back and ready to use. Just in general, it's the little things that make this card solid in the end, even if it's not the best in the archetype it's supposed to be used in. Final thoughts on Motor Worms, huh? Well, they're alright. The main issue is that you really need a different insect deck to be in the main deck for Motor Worms to do anything other than, well, crumble. They don't form their own deck. Otherwise, you get a Link 3 monster, a handful of insect token spawners, and a focus on blocking zones that needs a continuous spell to make sure you're not benefiting the opponent to an offensive degree. I mean, hell, a lot better than the Ojama tokens in today's day and age. I'd say mess around with this in a ballpark deck and see what comes from it. So that was the triple feature. To wrap this up, Helix. This set really needs better cards at the end of the day. Level 5s for Lynx is not good by any means. Level 4 and lower monsters and better support cards would be highly appreciated, and fix their stupid generic FTK so they could actually be printed and not just see another card hit on the ban list immediately upon release. Dark Mummy. Like Helix, Dark Mummy needs more main deck monsters and maybe more ways to interact with the virus traps, maybe search them, do something on their own, that sort of deal. They're zombies, so they're solid in that regard, but when your type is the only thing you have going for you, you're more of a basic Tinder girl than a Yu-Gi-Oh archetype. Motor Worms. No main deck monsters at all, and dependent on the kind of insect deck you build around them. Not to mention the absolute need for Wormhole defense for the lockdown to even function, and it's not even searchable. Oh man, it's about time we get into this unholy abomination of an archetype. And with the end of Season 2 of Vrains having long since aired, and Season 3 taking over, seemingly nearing its own end, now is the perfect time to talk about the Hydradrives. Okay, maybe it would have been better like 2 months ago, but give me a break, I was sick. Hydradrives are a primarily Earth Cyberse archetype that were the main deck of Bowman and Haru, a pair of secondary AI antagonists in Season 2 of Vrains, who were originally servants to the Light Ignis, Lightning, before Bowman absorbed 5 out of the 6 Ignis, and Haru became the main antagonist. Catch all that? I'd say watch the show, but the best parts of it are just the dub, not caring.
The only thing brave about you is that you're still willing to dab in public.
Made up of 7 main deck monsters, a bunch of spells and traps, and a crap ton of Link monsters, all of ranging quality, this deck has been bloated for all the wrong reasons, given Bowman has had a grand total of 6 duels, and each duel gave him new toys to play with that were usually discarded at the start of the next duel. His entire deck is based on the same writing problem that plagued Merrick's Egyptian God card, where Ra would just gain effects in every single duel and eventually became so bloated that reading it gives you points at your school's book fair. You got everything from attribute manipulation, to control, to stun, and then you got some of Bowman's cards that involve dice rolls, like he's trying to practice going first in locals to get off a Nurse Burn FTK.
The fuck happened to your eyes?
However, the attribute stun playstyle, practically the main part of his deck as a whole, has one teeny tiny error that holds it back entirely. That error being that Bowman has nothing in his deck for facing light and dark monsters. That's right, he only has stun effects for fire, water, wind, and earth, meaning Hydradrives are only useful in specific duels against those attribute-based decks, which made up 4 of the 6 Ignis in Vrains. The other 2 being Lightning, who ran Armatos Legio, and AI, who had Playmaker, and they were both wise enough to have multiple attributes of main deck monsters and dark attribute ace monsters, hilariously enough. Hell, Bowman's win-loss record has only 2 wins out of 6 duels in it, which were against Blue Maiden Owie, which doesn't count, and Soulburner, and no joke, it takes a lot for Soulburner to be taken down considering he's just straight up running a deck that went all the way to Worlds, and won Worlds, and simultaneously won Dragon Duel Worlds. Let's be real here, as everyone knows the power ceiling of Hunter-style decks like Mech Lords and 5Ds, and the Ally of Justice in real life. To start, let's cover the most recurring monster in Bowman's deck, and the monster that held the honor of the only monster Percy was able to code for a very, very long time. Hydradrive Booster is a level 1 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effect. If there are no monsters in the main monster zones, you can special summon this card from your hand. So, yeah, all around a fairly decent monster. Just in general, a nice first turn option that becomes a vanilla if there are monsters in your main monster zones. Or your opponents. Well, at least, you know, Bowman could summon all 3 of them in a turn by linking one away, and then special summoning the second, and then you normal summon the third. Whew, that's a nice poker hand you got there. All around a solid enough monster, though it is one of your only main deck choices when making the deck on Percy, or in general. The reason will be shown with the next card coming up ahead, but yeah, nothing else much to say here, as it's just a link fodder monster. Run 3. Covered Hydradrive is the next monster, and is a level 1 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effect. When your opponent takes battle damage, you can special summon this card from your hand in attack position. Cannot be destroyed by battle. While another Hydradrive monster is on the field, you take no battle damage. Once per turn during your standby phase, destroy all Hydradrive Link monsters you control. During your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can discard 1 card. Your opponent can attack with only 1 monster during each battle phase this turn. Covered is at the very least a decent fodder monster for links, but in general a terrible monster attempting to wall for you with battle protection, a Dark Door effect that makes you go minus, and the slight problem that it nukes every play you had last turn during the standby phase. Sure, you link it away in main phase too, but have you ever considered that Gnome material has a Raigeki taped onto it now? Also, this brings up that detail I need to get out there about this archetype before moving on. Covered is one of the many monsters from the Hydradrive main deck that either had no defense, no level, or no attribute shown in the anime, nor told to the audience. Because of this, Percy legit cannot code these main deck monsters into the game, as Percy is normally focused on accuracy of a card and its effects. So now it's left to fan interpretations on Dueling Book if you want to make a complete Hydradrive deck. Hence why we're using fan-made proxies over our own, in case you were curious. Just needed to bring this up because information on this is potentially faulty, as it is straight up unknown. Make them all divine if you want, it's exactly as accurate as saying they're Earth. Break Hydradrive is also a level 1 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effects. If your opponent activates a card or effect that tributes a monsters while you control a Hydradrive monster, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, Ukazi the opponent. If a Hydradrive monsters is special summoned to your field while this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Break is a decent lair counter, but not by much sadly in theory given you get a hand trap that's highly specific in its use. It doesn't work on Kaijus either, in case anyone wanted to make that case for this thing. Otherwise, it's fine for linking, but that's really all it is. Also, another side note, because this archetype loves those, this card had all its stats and stuff shown, and yet it's unable to be coded because of the tribute effect. So there you go, people who are gonna bring it up in the comments. How would you fix the age-old question of Stormforth versus Kaiser Coliseum rolled into a hand trap and smoked by a man that has the chin the size of your mother? Hydradrive Mutation is another level 1 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effects. If this card is in your hand, quick effect, you can target 1 face-up continuous trap you control, return it to the hand, and if you do, special summon this card. Then you can set 1 continuous trap from your hand. It can be activated this turn. You can target 1 face-up monster on the field, this card's attribute becomes that monster's. Okay, this is actually a pretty solid main deck monster, I can't even lie on that. Mutation is solid, given you can effectively reset floodgates to the field for a free special summon. For example, bounce back that anti-spell for a summon, reset it, you can use it on the same turn, but also you can use all your spells and stuff. It's like turning off vanities for a turn all over again, except you get the vanities back for your opponent. Not to mention the attributed change effect is... Actually, no, exactly, not to mention, it's completely worthless. It's your only way to get anything for light and dark, but only if the links took any Hydradrive monster, or if it gave any Hydradrive the attribute of the target. Sadly, it does not, so that effect is wasted and feels more like a sure, why not sort of addition. It's like if Boral Sword couldn't be targeted by opponent's card effects during main phase 2 like a reverse Leo. It would make the card objectively better, but it would make damn near 0 impact. Also, this card has a full proxy, but that proxy is too damn small, meaning not all of its effects can fully be read, and thus, rip another monster for the main deck. That is 3 cuts out of 4 monsters so far. Hydradrive Bringer is, as well, a level 1 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effects. When it's summoned, add a Hydradrive monster from your graveyard to your hand. Back to the bland, but generally good. As here, we have a by-the-numbers recycling effect that doesn't really help much aside from recycling mutation multiple times. As well, the specifics here are kinda weird, given the Wikia says it's by summon, but most fan proxies have it as normal summon. Let's do what we do with most things, and assume the fans are wrong. An effect like this that isn't once per turn is bound to be nutty, but surprisingly, mutation is just about the only card that really can be abused with this. The rest of the monsters can't really be spammed out as easily, and looping this thing is pretty difficult in a Hydradrive deck, as reborns are few and far between. Maybe this is the card that breaks them as an engine, but at that point you've got like 3 of the 40 cards, and I still feel confident in saying that this deck fundamentally doesn't work. Hydradrive Agent is a level... Okay, back it up. I see 4 too many stars on this thing. There are way too many stars. There's supposed to be 1. Okay, it's level 5, whatever. Level 5 Earth Cyberse monster with the following effects. When this card is tribute summoned, you can special summon a Hydradrive monster from your graveyard. If the summoned monster is a Link monster, draw 1 card. Agent's the only non-level 1 in the main deck, and it's a tribute to boot? We're a field spell away from this being a bad hidden arsenal archetype. We've already got the attribute changing. Free revival on tribute summon is neat, plus a draw if you revive a Link, which is also neat. But it's really not too good. How do I put this? You need to tribute summon it! It could be good with Balancer Lord or Signet Optimize, but even then this is more of a justification than a combo. What's especially bad, though, is that one of their links specifically needs a level 5 or higher Hydradrive, meaning you need Agent for it, and we'll get to that when we get to that. Best part is that we don't even know Agent's level, and the assumption that it's a high level because of said link, so imagine if it's just dead-ass level 7. Or 9. Or 11, for that matter. Make that Sky Palace Babylon. Who knows? The final main deck monster is Hydradrive Element, who is... Okay, it's another level 1 Earth Cyberse, with the following effects. If this card is sent to the graveyard as link material, you can target a face-up monster on the field and declare 1 attribute. It becomes that attribute until the end phase. The final Hydradrive, and all it does is alter the attribute of a monster. Oh, that's really interesting. Please do tell me. I am quaking in my boots. This effect, as well, is only used when he makes the big bad in the final duel, Bowman does. Trust me, I have some pretty choice words about him when we get there. Though, that aside, this guy was added to Percy recently, so the deck exists, right? God, it's like I'm reviewing a ghost. That was the main deck's final monster, and overall, this main deck is just a bland mix of extra deck spam fodder that doesn't even do it well, with no real purposes of what else they can be used for aside from links, and they don't even do that well. Again. I talked about this with Battlewasps, but knowing what the deck wants to do is a crucial factor when designing an archetype, and you should be able to get the general idea of it from the monsters alone. All I get from Hydradrives thus far is that they have a handful of spam, a handful of gimmicks, and then some protection, and otherwise the rest are just slow revival for fodder or slow protection. Mutation and Booster are the best, obviously, and I'd probably say the worst is Element, given how lacking a use it truly has. Also, as our final tally, that is 2 main decks on Percy out of 7 total monsters, due to Vrains not showing these important factors, the proxy being too small to read, or the effect just not working on the simulator. That's just brilliant. That's just genius. On to the extra deck, which is also missing some members on Percy, but who cares? I have pictures and text on screen. That's all we ever needed. To start, here is Flow Hydradrive, a Link 1 Wind Cyberse with 1000 attack and 1 Link arrow pointing down. That requires 1 Hydradrive monster to make, and that's the following effect. Cannot be used as link material for a Link 1 Link monster. If your opponent controls a Wind monster, this card can attack your opponent directly. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 Hydradrive token in defense position. Wonderful, I get a bigger Lagool for my troubles. That's only really working if I'm facing Ritual Beasts, or decide to use the worst main deck monster to warp its attribute. Nothing to write home about, aside from the on destruction spawn a token effect. But tell me, did you enjoy that monster? Do you want it again multiple times in a row? Great news if that's the case, because it's the effect on 3 other Link 1 Hydradrive monsters of different attributes. Burn Hydradrive, Grand Hydradrive, and Coolant Hydradrive are all Link 1 Cyberse monsters that are fire, earth, and water respectively, and all share the same effect, materials, and attack, and arrows as flow. just altered to have the direct attack effect for their specific attribute, nothing more. Okay, do we see a connection here? Let's go back to the other Dynasty videos for a moment. Alchemy Beasts all had the same bad direct attacking effect, and were only different in attribute.
Now, if you like this incredible example of Submarine Roid getting outclassed, you'll adore the fact that it's printed on the text of 6 cards! I repeat, this effect was copy-pasted onto 6 monsters, all of different attributes.
Cookpals didn't have enough attack to do anything. Royal Cookpals, King Burger, Knight Pasta, Prince Curry, Queen Omelette, and Princess Pudding,
You fucking plagiarists.
have the following effect. If a monster is normal or special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you can target one of those monsters. Return this card to the hand, and if you do, destroy that target. Once per turn, you can target one Royal Cookpal monster you control. Double its original attack until the end of this turn. This card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. Okay, so you're expected to spam out increasingly larger and larger monsters, never to be facilitated by in-archetype Pendulum support, and you think we're gonna have the time to tribute summon these things that get drop-kicked by a fucking mushroom man? Battlewasps have no real identity whatsoever, and just became worse Blackwings upon their release into the real game anyway. Something you may have noticed with the main deck editions is that there appears to be no sense of cohesion between them. They can kind of swarm, almost never recur, deal enough damage to make you think they were mosquitoes and not wasps, and then there's a battle trap? No real strategy or win condition is possible so far, and yes, I know we're only looking at the main deck cards in a Synchro archetype, but look at something like Burning Abyss. Great effects that are easy to get off, and you get the idea immediately that they need to be sent to the graveyard, and cards that do that are good, even without looking into the myriad of extra deck cards that help them do this. If that's too good of a deck as an example, we can talk about Mech Lords. At least you know they all hate Synchros and want them to be absorbed as fast as possible, and the archetype gives you some ways of popping your own cards to summon your main boss monsters, albeit the options do leave a lot to be desired. This? No idea what the Synchros could do from only looking at the main deck. If I did a grading scale and I added cohesion as a category, it would be a solid F. Every member of the Knights of Hadway merely existed to summon links in boring and unrealistic ways and then go, haha, I have big number now. So that was the triple feature. To wrap this up, Helix. This set really needs better cards at the end of the day. Level 5s for links is not good by any means. Level 4 and lower monsters and better support cards would be highly appreciated, and fix their stupid generic FTK so they could actually be printed and not just see another card hit on the ban list immediately upon release. Dark Mummy. Like Helix, Dark Mummy needs more main deck monsters and maybe more ways to interact with the virus traps, maybe search them, do something on their own, that sort of deal. They're zombies, so they're solid in that regard, but when your type is the only thing you have going for you, you're more of a basic Tinder girl than a Yu-Gi-Oh archetype. Motorworms. No main deck monsters at all, and dependent on the kind of insect deck you build around them. Not to mention the absolute need for wormhole defense for the lockdown to even function, and it's not even searchable. Do you see my problem? This isn't the final boss of Vrains. This is the final boss of Dynasty of the Useless. Everything I've had to complain about, every deck I've covered, this has them beat by mere virtue of being all of them polymerized together and lit on fire. I've said all this before, and yet it's not like I just don't make the video saying it would be reductive and incredibly boring to watch, because they somehow crammed so much diarrhea into this deck, it has multiple facets of garbage I've never seen in an archetype. They are somehow so fucking bad that they're not only boring, but interesting, split right down the middle like a Gordian knot of every viral disease known to man and then 3 more. Okay, back to the ally of Lagul here. What is painful about this is that Bowman could have been solid only if the anime established him to have a Light Link 1 and or a Dark Link 1. At the very least have one of them, but you should have both. Then it would make sense for a gimmick as it would reach its full potential, especially since it's not a case of, oh, he needs that Ignis for the Link 1, or story reasons. That's not a valid defense. Applying this to a real-life situation, one could just side in and out the Link 1s on the fly for various duels, which means that on this deck's best day, you're restricted on your side deck. That's a new one. I've legitimately never heard of a deck that does that. Not even just one, but like 3 at any given time. And even through all this, we don't have Light and Dark Link 1s, so he has the option to cover only 4 of the 6 attributes, one of which he already covers as the default attribute for his links being Earth! They're all Earth! And result in his deck hunting only 2/3 of the main attributes. You were literally the main antagonist. Why is Vrains written by people who can't tell a nursery rhyme from Samuel Beckett? Why is it watched by people who can't tell the difference? I can't wait for the Vrains stands in the comments to tell me, the show is good because I relate to Playmaker to zero emotions. Fuck off, the show's bad, your opinion's wrong. Move on. Twin Hydradrive Knight is a Link 2 Earth Cyburst with 1800 attack, markers pointing left and right, and requires 2 Hydradrive Link monsters, and also has the following effects. If this card is Link summoned, you can target up to 2 Hydradrive Link monsters used as Link material. This card is treated as having the same attributes as that target's. Monsters your opponent controls with the same attribute as this card have their effects negated. Twin Knight sets up the base of what Hydradrives appear to do in their playstyle. I know, finally. To stun attributes based on the materials used to make it. However, there is kind of a design flaw, if made real, that is hilarious, in that you could just use an attribute change card on the Link, like Scroll of Bewitchment. Watch Bowman cry as you turn his Fire and Wind Twin Knight into a water monster for your Element Magician Beatdown deck. Running counters to Hydradrives is like constantly wearing a hazmat suit in case you get bitten by a radioactive wolf, but hey, I've never been against bullying. However, the big sin is that it needs, just Hydradrive Links to make. So the main deck is only good for the Link 1s, and the Link 1s are only good for the Link 2s, and 3s, and 4s, and 5s. Linear playstyle, thy name is Gimmick Puppets. But ye have competition. Next is Bowman's first boss, and get used to this as he uses multiple boss monsters over time. Really sounds like a Jaden problem to me. Trident Hydradrive Lord, a Link 3 Earth Cyburst with 2300 attack, 3 markers going left, right, and down, needs 3 Hydradrive Link monsters to make, and has the following effects. If this card is Link summoned, you can target all Hydradrive Link monsters used as Link material. It gains those attributes. Monsters your opponent controls with the same attribute as this card's have their effects negated. Once per turn, quick effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. The attributes of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls become the same as the targeted monsters until the end of this turn. Here we have the main sin of the Hydradrive Links above the Link 1s. Other than like 1 or 2 of them, all of the Hydradrive Links take exact numbers of Hydradrive Link monsters to make instead of taking 2+ monsters, or even 3+ monsters, meaning that Twin Knight serves legitimately no purpose for the deck aside from if you just don't feel like making this thing or you physically can't because your deck doesn't work. If Trident and the other Link 3 monsters took 2+ Links, or 2+ Hydradrives to make, and the Link 4 monsters took the same but extended to 3+, then you could argue Twin Knight gets a spot or 2 to help make them, and you can use revival spells into Twin Knight to help make the Links easier, because, spoiler, Twin Knight's the only Link 2. However, that's just not the case, given this archetype cannot benefit from one of the inherent benefits of Links, that being the power of counting their Link rating as materials for other Link monsters. As for Trident, it's a mediocre boss monster. The quick effect is alright, but when would your opponent be controlling monsters of multiple attributes unless you were facing a combo deck, and by the time you get them out, the opponent will have killed you 3 times over? Oh, yeah, just do this against Dragonides, you know, the best deck of the format right now, and they still negate you! As well, since the negator's only on field, graveyard effects are still live, so enjoy failing to stun Atlantean Orcus by making the Orcus into water monsters. Or just getting your ass handed to you by a certain deck that plays light and dark monsters and spams the board so hard that they gave us a meteor to deal with them. This lord is certainly not impressing me anytime soon. Our first Link 4 is the next boss monster for the deck, Rousing Hydradrive Monarch, a Link 4 Earth Cyburst with 3000 attack, firewall markers of up, down, left, right, BA, start. Wait, sorry, wrong Konami property. It takes 4 Hydradrive Link monsters to make and has the following effects. If this card is special summoned from the extra deck, place 4 Hydradrive counters on this card, and if you do, this card is also Water, Fire, and Wind attribute while face up on the field. If a player would normal or special summon monsters with the same attribute as this card, they must summon it in attack position. Okay. During the main phase, quick effect, you can remove 1 Hydradrive counter from this card. Roll a 6-sided die! If your opponent controls a face-up monster in their monster zone with an attribute that corresponds to the result, send as many of those monsters to the graveyard as possible, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the number of monsters sent to the graveyard times 500. 1 is earth, 2 is water, 3 is fire, 4 is wind, 5 is light, 6 is dark. What is this? Are you out here trying to tell me that Dice Foon didn't have enough variants? That Arcana Force wasn't ball-busting enough? Rousing introduces Hydradrive to the use of counters, as well as a die effect out of nowhere, all for the sake of luck-based non-destruction nuke and burn quick effect? I feel like Bowman's trying to sell me a new car with all these gimmicks. Completely legitimate criticism aside, there is a big note that while it does count as 4 of the 6 attributes out of the gate, there's no attribute negation on Rousing, and it's instead just limiting the position those monsters can be summoned in, and making them default to attack position, when Link monsters already do that fundamentally. Yeah, Rousing's a hard pass from me, mate. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. With that, we enter the next wave of the extra deck, as we're basing them basically in phases of Bowman duels. And these are the ones that you will likely use over Trident and Rousing any day of the week. However, these two are hindered by a change in summoning condition that makes them very controversial to summon. Cubed Hydradrive Lord is a Link 3 Earth Cyberse with 2300 attack, same markers as the Trident Lord. Takes 3 Hydradrive Link monsters with the same attribute to make, and has the following effects. If this card is Link summoned, you can declare 2 attributes, Water, Fire, or Wind. It's also true as those attributes, same old, same old. Negate the effects of monsters with the same attributes as this card while your opponent controls them. When this card destroys a monster with the same attribute as this card by battle, you can activate this effect. It can attack again in a row. When it's sent to the graveyard as a Link material, draw 1 card. That's a nice and aggressive shift over what Trident does. The fact it lets you pick the other 2 attributes you want to cover and adds it onto its own Earth attribute is especially sweet, but let's not forget about the fact you won't ever summon this thing. Once again, it's exact numbers of Hydradrive Links, but also limited to the same attributes, which makes him damn near impossible and forces you to go on the Konami Facebook page begging for a 20-card extra deck. Though, imagine if it were 2+ links of the same attributes, as, again, it would have given Twin Knight a larger purpose for the deck instead of locking the knight in the corner forever alone. And that's still overly balancing the card. Otherwise, the multi-attack is nice and a decent draw effect, as well. I don't know why you'd use Cubed for a material, given it can only be treated as 1 material in its own archetype for a Link 3. Nothing more to say other than I'd run this over Trident any day, despite the conditions, since this actually does something. Next is the pinnacle of, come at me bro, I'm stacked! It's Tesseract Hydradrive Monarch. Monarch is a massive Link 4 Earth Cyberse with 3000 attack, has Borreload Dragon markers, takes 4 Hydradrive Link monsters with the same attribute to make, and has the following effects. If this card is special summoned, you can activate this effect. This card is also Water, Fire, and Wind while face-up on the field, and get the effects of monsters with the same attribute as this card while your opponent controls them. Same old, same old. During your battle step, if this card battled this turn, make your opponent send 1 face-up monster they control with the same attribute as this card to the graveyard, their choice. And if they do, this card can attack an opponent's monster again in a row. If this card is in your graveyard, you can pay 1000 life points. Special summon this card, and if you do, double its attack, but banish it during the end phase. Second verse, same as the first. Tesseract is a vast improvement over Rousing with a highly aggressive stun effect and a powerful recurring effect made for slaying foes and thoughts alike. Not to mention the multi-attacking effect, which is just an even bigger, spicy add-on that kind of makes Boral Sword have competition in the OTK game. Look at that. Tesseract was on Best Boss Monsters Part 2 for a reason. It's a really good card, no doubt about it. It's just the rest of the archetype does nothing to make this thing any less than a nuisance to summon. Actually, more of an impossibility. What's a level beyond impossibility? That's what this is. Oh no, it's sad? This thing was only used once against Aoi, because the writers hate her, and shadowed her even though, you know, she got her new fancy Marincest deck, when Trickstars could have handled Bowman with ease. This will probably be the boss you shoot for, though, as given what the remainder we got to look at holds, it's not that good. It's really not that good. Paradox Hydradrive Atlas is a big boy Earth Cyberse Link 3 with arrows going up, down, and left, and has a whopping 0 attack. Takes 2+ Hydradrive monsters, including a level 5 or higher effect monster to make, meaning you have to use Agent. Oh, and I guess it has an effect too. If this card is special summoned, you can roll a 6-sided die, and this card becomes the attribute that corresponds to the result. 1 is Earth, 2 is Water, 3 is Fire, 4 is Wind, 5 is Light, and 6 is Dark. During your main phase, you can roll a 6-sided die. Special summon 1 Hydradrive Link monster from your extra deck with the same Link rating as the result to your zone this card points to. You can only use this effect of Paradox Hydradrive Atlas once per turn. Yeah, we have hard once per turns in Vrains, isn't that kind of funny? Monsters this card points to become the same attribute as this card. Okay. While another monster with the same attribute as this card is on the field, this card is unaffected by your opponent's card effects. Also, it cannot be targeted for attacks. Turn that okay into a good. Yay. Finally, we have a somewhat easy way to summon monsters in Hydradrives, and it's based entirely on luck! Oh, joy! That aside, Atlas has 0 attack, and all he does is just fart out a Hydradrive, which is pretty good. Despite it working as an easier way to summon the higher rated links, it's still based on luck, plus if it hits 6, it fizzles out since there are no Link 6 Hydradrives. Trust me, if there were, it would have made the thumbnail, and I would have abandoned any and all pretense and smashed it with red arrows, but that one picture of Jane that makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Clickbait thumbnails is sent past bad and into something you'd take out of context on Twitter. Yeah, like that. Oh, let's not forget that the summoning condition effectively makes you have to get off Agent's effect to make it, in the best scenario of tribute summoning for Agent, revive Twin Knight, link into this. Otherwise, Atlas over here is just a big joke of a monster, given he's a monster screaming, "We fixed it, right?" only used for the duel with Soul Burner with a protection effect that is so situational that Bowman needed a situational trap just to make sure he didn't lose to Soul Burner's Pyro Phoenix. It stings how this thing was the cause of Soul Burner's only loss in the entire Season 2, and he lost because of a monster who looks like a shocked Pikachu meme. So what I'm saying in the end is that Atlas is the best Link we've seen so far, given it has a use for Twin Knight, and it can ignore the pain in summoning the other Links. But only if you roll dice well, so practice now, I guess. Now we get into the final stretch of these Links, thank God. This is the set of Link monsters Bowman used in his final duel with Playmaker, and yet we're reaching the pinnacle of stupidity this archetype holds. First off is Alteration Hydradrive, a Link 1 Earth Cyberse Link monster, with an arrow going bottom right. Takes one Hydradrive monster to make and has the following effects. Cannot be used as material for the Link summon of a Link 1 Link monster. Cannot be used as material for the Link summon of a Link 1 Link monster. If this card is Link summoned, you can target one Hydradrive Link monster you control. Special summon from your graveyard as many Hydradrive Link monsters as possible with a lower Link rating than the targeted monster to your main monster zones the targeted monster points to, but negate their effects if any, then destroy the targeted monster. You can only use this effect of Alteration Hydradrive once per turn. So out of nowhere, well, more for the sake of plot like all of other Bowman's monsters, Bowman gets a random Link 1 just for the sake of a pseudo soul charge for the deck. Given what Links we have seen and their markers, you're at max reviving 2 of them, even if Judgment Arrows is a factor because of the fact that it specifies Link monster zones. Oh yes, we'll be talking about the Link spell later, don't worry, it doesn't give me a hernia at all, why do you ask? It's alright otherwise, but given you're going to be using the elemental ones for the stuns more often than not, this one leads to 1 at most because the extra deck is tight. Thanks to this monster, as well as Element, Bowman was able to fill his board in 5 Links, all of different attributes. As for what Alteration is building up towards, yeah, there's no use stalling, here he is. Chimera Hydradrive Dragrid is a Link 5 Earth Cyberse monster with 4,000 attack, arrows going left, down, bottom right, and right. And it takes 5 Link monsters with different attributes to make, and has the following effects. If this card is special summoned from the extra deck, place one Hydradrive counter on this card. Once per turn, quick effect, you can remove one Hydradrive counter from this card, roll a 6-sided die, return this card to the extra deck. Yeah, all that work just went away. Then special summon one Draghead monster from the extra deck with the attribute that corresponds to the result. 1 is Earth, 2 is Water, 3 is Fire, 4 is Wind, 5 is Light, 6 is Dark. Okay, let's break it down real quick. Why is this thing the way it is? Is it nurture? Is it nature? Who do I have to blame for this? Granted, I do know the reason why it's like this. It's to be a big boss and try to make Bowman a threat. Doesn't do anything but be a big beat stick unless you use the effect, which makes it replace itself with a head under the chance of a dice roll. That would be fine if they made it to where there was a wide variety in these Draghead monsters and what they are to do, and maybe they have their own bill and make sure you don't beat around and lose all your hard work, right? Right? That's what's happening, right? Right? You got that? Psych, bitch, you got 2 of them. Chimera, Hydradrive, Draghead, Flame, and Aqua are a pair of Link 5 Cyberse monsters with 4,000 attack each, and their Fire and Water attribute respectively, with the following markers and effects. Aqua has up right, up left, down left. If this card is special summoned, negate the effects of all monsters on the field, except those that are linked to this card. At the end of either player's turn, return this card to the extra deck and special summon a Chimera Hydradrive Dragrid from the extra deck. Flame! Markers! Up left, up right, down right. If this card is special summoned, destroy all monsters on the field except those that are linked to this card. At the end of either player's turn, return to the extra deck, summon a Chimera Hydradrive Dragrid from the extra deck. And both of these have no summoning material or requirement or anything, so you just summon them with Dragrid and that's it. For all the build-up, Chimera had the fact he wasted the lives of multiple NPCs and humans just to pull this thing and make it from the ether. All the potential this mini-theme could have opened, given Bowman, quick reminder, had 5 of the 6 Ignis inside of himself for the final battle, and they only made 2. They made 2 heads. I don't know why. It may have been a lack of time. God, people still watch this show? Even the Raiders gave up on this show! Are you gonna say that it's a lack of time and Konami and 4Kids or whoever you want to blame just didn't want it to work out? You think they're the victims here? It's such an utter garbage answer that Oscar the Grouch is tossing it out of his can going, ew. Here's a thought. If you're gonna make a concept like this, explore it to its logical end. Don't just toss it out there, make 2 different heads, drop it like that, and expect people to accept it. Because of this lack of drag heads other than a fire and a water one, you need to specifically roll a 2 or a 3 on Dragrid's dice roll, as the other 4 options do absolutely nothing. And then Dragrid is rendered null and void as he puts himself back into the extra deck for no benefit whatsoever. If only they made the 3 other drag heads for Earth, Windy, and Lightning at least. They don't need to make sense in the story. Give him a dark one too. It doesn't matter. I've stopped caring about Vrains' story after Season 1. Episode 1. Thank you. If you just gave him all the heads, it would actually be more than an empty series of disappointing beatsticks with on-summon effects in a disappointing archetype. The worst part is that if they decide to go the route of everything else in this deck, the most we'd ever get is a Wind and an Earth, considering Light and Dark just don't exist and we're going off Dragon Ruler logic. Only other way you could make them is through Atlas, and another card we'll see in a while. That's even more specific, given you need to roll a 5 on Atlas, or take 4,000 to 5,000 battle damage in one attack off of that other card we're going to be bringing up in a little bit. And my brain is already shutting down. Effect-wise, these two are not much to talk about. Aqua is skill drain for everything, not pointing to all its up arrows and the left side, while Flame is a dark hole with mirrored markers and the same restriction. Hell, these effects are terrible, given if you put down the drag grid to the EMZ, like you likely will. You'll give the opponent 3 spaces to be safe from the effect, while hindering yourself. While they could theoretically be good disruption, it's all held back thanks to drag grid being terrible. But you know what? This entire series is so poorly done, it's just really sad. But there's even more! To make it even more pointless and stupid. If that wasn't enough, Bowman then uses Dragrid as an entire material for his true, real, I'm not kidding guys, this is my last one, I promise, don't tell my mom, ace, which he got thanks to the lives of all of Link Vrains, and was only beat by Yusaku's own Link 5. Way to go for mass theoretical genocide there, Mr. Starchild. Enough stalling, here it is, the final Link monster of this nightmare of an archetype, the Perfect Link. And perfect has the biggest quotation marks the Microsoft Word can allow. That is Perfectron Hydradrive Dragon. Perfectron Hydradrive Dragon is a Link 5 Earth Cyburst with 0 attack, and the same markers as Dragrid, but it only takes 1+ Link monsters to make, and has the following effects. If this card is special summoned from the extra deck, you can place 5 Hydradrive counters on this card. This gains 1,000 attack for each one on it. You take no battle damage from attacks involving this card while it has a Hydradrive counter on it. If this card would be destroyed, you can remove 1 Hydradrive counter from this card instead. After damage calc, if this card battled, you can destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each Hydradrive Link monster in your graveyard. Let me bring up old ground for a new reason. Why does this have to exist? Logically, if you had a monster this generic in your archetype, then here's a question. Why make literally anything else in Hydradrives other than this? It's like going to a Mexican restaurant and ordering chicken fingers as if to spite the fact you can get anything else. Legit, the fact this thing is practically generic and not meeting exact numbers makes this the best Link by default! In an archetype that gave us Link after Link after Link after Link that was archetype locked, as well as locked to those specific numbers of materials, and even specific attributes of those materials. The final boss is something that is practically full generic, and by proxy puts into question the entirety of Bowman's deck as an archetype. You could just slam this thing into whatever you want because big dude, big arrows, Raigeki lol. Effect-wise, its use of counters only for attack stats and destruction protection is okay. Of course, is without any sense of attributes done the deck built to its peak with Tesseract, like this entire series from the final duel. It just screams that Konami and the anime staff realized giving Bowman Dragrid and the Dragheads would extend beyond the arbitrary anime season limit after adding it in, so they scrapped the concept and made Perfectron all for the sake of distracting the audience from it, like jingling keys in front of a toddler. Konami's just looking you dead in the face and saying, "Woo! Look at the shiny new dragon!" That's legit the only reason I can think of for Perfectron being so generic and easy to summon. It's the only reason they made this thing and forgot about everything else the archetype does. To make a threat with numbers bigger than Clock Dragon that got weaker thanks to Yusaku making Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid to ram into it multiple times in the turn and waste its counters. Granted, while the attacks Dark Fluid did were stylized to say the least, it does not take away from the fact that Perfectron is the best Link in Hydradrives by a country mile, and yet it is hard to not believe its mere existence ruined an idea that had potential to grow. But, I mean, the idea was also pretty well elaborated on, and, they didn't do anything with it. Jesus, that was just the monsters! First is Hydradrive Accelerator, an equipped spell with the following effect. Equip only to a Hydradrive monster. Apply the following effects depending on the equipped monster's attribute. Earth. The equipped monster cannot be destroyed by battle. Water. The equipped monster is unaffected by your opponent's trap cards. Fire. The equipped monster is unaffected by your opponent's spell cards. The equipped monster is unaffected by your opponent's spell cards. Wind. Once per turn during either player's turn, if your opponent activates a card effect that targets a cards you control, other than the equipped monster, you can negate its activation. Okay, this is some decent protection, even though it's heavily reliant on the link ones used to make the monster on which you want to put this on. It can be great on Tesseract and Rousing, who count as all four regardless, but you'd probably be running Tesseract over Rousing, and also summoning either of them as a pipe dream. But yeah, immunity, spells, traps, battle, and being targeted is a sweet deal all around for a boss of Tesseract's caliber. Mess around with this one, but only if you can easily get out Rousing or Tesseract via cheating them out. So practice those dice rolls! Hydradrive Defragment is a quick play spell with the following effect. If a Hydradrive Link monster you control is destroyed by a card effect this turn, target a spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy it. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target a Hydradrive spell in your graveyard, add it to your hand. And back we go to bad like clockwork. Defragment is just an overblown MST that's better as a target for foolish burial goods than anything else. Nothing much to say here, just run Typhoon, lol. Hydradrive Rebuild is a normal spell with the following effect. Target one Hydradrive monster you control, destroy it, and if the Hydradrive monster destroyed by this effect activates its effect in your graveyard this turn, special summon one Hydradrive monster from your graveyard, but it cannot attack, its effects are negated, and also it's destroyed during the end phase. Alright, this is the best spell that they really have. Rebuild is actually pretty solid, as it works to pop Flow, Burn, Coolant, and Grand, who all spawn tokens, and then they could just be restored. As well, this is not once per turn, so if you open one token card or a main deck monster in 3 of these, you could easily spam the board and link ones and tokens to help make higher links. Granted, that's a pretty investing combo, but hey, we found something! Solid spell you should definitely run with Monster Reborn for max benefit. Maybe you can actually summon the best cards in this deck. You can't. Your dreams are fake and your god is dead. Speaking of tokens, here's Hydradrive Scabbard! A quick play spell with the following effect. Special summon one Hydradrive token. In defense position. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack while this card and an Earth, Water, Fire, and Wind Hydradrive Link monsters are in your graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, have any battle damage from that battle, also both players take any battle damage from that battle. Scabbard is solid as well, given it's a named token spawning spell for the set with no real downsides. However, the graveyard effect is, hilarious. It has such a bad activation condition of effectively needing all 4 basic Link monsters in the graveyard to even get this effect to trigger, and all that for having your battle damage and reflecting the other half to the opponent. Run it 3, don't rely on the graveyard effect, you'll probably get it off once and go, haha, that's funny. Property Flood is a normal spell with the following effect. Tribute one Hydradrive monster, then target one Hydradrive Link monster you control. Special summon Hydradrive Link monsters from your graveyard with the same attribute as the tributed monster, up to the targeted monster's Link rating, but they cannot attack. Their effects are negated, also they are destroyed during the end phase. Hard once per turn, you cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this card except Hydradrive monsters. More decent revival in a deck that practically begs for it to make any good plays. It can help in making the higher links, but you can only really summon 1 or 2 given the link arrows in most Hydradrive links, and you aren't going to make Dragron. And you aren't going to make Dragrid or Perfectron just for this card. Hydradrive Impact is an equipped spell with the following effect. Equip only to a Hydradrive Link monster. Must attack a Fable. If your opponent controls a monster, any battle damage the equipped monster inflicts to them by a direct attack is doubled. Sounds pretty conflicting, but you know what the Link ones do. Most of you probably forgot about them amid the flood of cards we went over, but let me say that this plus the next spell and a single trap I'll talk about soon enough were the only contributions of Haru into this archetype from his single duel with Blue Maiden, as he was there just for her to show off the new deck in Marincess. Let that sink in. Bowman's little brother only contributed 3 cards to the cesspool. At least he didn't play it all season like his brother, so he gets a gold star for that at least. Back to Impact, all this equipped spell serves for in this deck is a minor buff and damage from the Link ones and their direct attack effect, which were already buffed by Judgment Arrows, but I digress. Nothing else more than that, kind of lacking in other departments however, so run an OTK strategy that can't exist. Hydradrive Utilization is a normal spell with the following effect. Pay 500 life points, then target one Hydradrive monster in your graveyard. Banish it, and if you do, add 1 card with the same name as the banished monster from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 per turn. Congrats kids, this is your Rhoda. Card that forces you to pay 500 life points and banish the monster from the graveyard to get another copy of only itself. I have nothing more to say, it's just bad. Run Sign-Up Mining and Lady Debug. They are Cybers, after all. Hydradrive Protection is a continuous spell with the following effect. Activate this card by targeting one Hydradrive Link monster you control, and one face-up spell/trap card in your spell and trap card zone. Your opponent cannot target those targeted cards with card effects. If this card leaves the field, the targeted cards cannot be destroyed by card effects. And we're back with the bland cards. Yay! Protection is, ironically, a bad kind of protection, because targeting protection is not relevant at all. As well as, okay, destruction protection, but that's only if it dies. Not exactly the kind of protection this fragile archetype needs. It's like trying to protect a mirror with another mirror. You get shattered glass everywhere. Stay far away from this card. The final spell for this deck is Hydradrive Re-Advent, a normal spell with the following effect. Target one Link monster in your graveyard with less attack than the monster your opponent controls with the highest attack. Special summon it. Negate its effects, destroy it during the end phase. That's more revival for the deck. It's specific to the attack of the opponent's strongest monster, and it only revives Links, but hey, it's something. It's probably good. Bowman only used this damn thing in order to make Perfectron Dragon by reviving Dragrid when Cyber's Clock Dragon was buffed from his effect and killed Dragrid. Stick to the other revival in this deck, or just run one or two. At least it's generic to a degree. I'd test it out. Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted me to talk about Judgment Arrows? You know, the Link 3 spell from hand? The one that's continuous, but also not? Ha! That's not a Hydradrive card, silly! And if we wanted to talk about all the jank garbage that shouldn't ever even be thought of by a custom card designer's mind, we could accomplish the same goal by asking a Yu-Gi-Oh fan why they think Yusei is a good character. Alright, I think I've alienated my audience enough. We can move on to the traps. Hydradrive Cycle is a continuous trap and has the following effect. Activate this card if your spell/trap cards are destroyed. Return one Hydradrive Link monster from your graveyard to the extra deck, then you can apply these effects. Draw cards equal to that Link monster's rating. Special summon one Hydradrive monster from your graveyard, but change its attack to 0. Once per turn during your main phase 1, you can pay 400 life points and declare one attribute. Not light or dark, ha, you thought, didn't you? Special summon one Hydradrive token to the turn player's field in defense position, and if you do, it becomes a declared attribute. Cycle has some solid potential in that it gives draws, recycling, and special summons from the graveyard in a single bundle. It's actually a really good trap card. It even has a token spawn effect like Generator, but be careful with it, because giving it to the opponent will mainly result in them using it for Link fodder to end you. Overall, it's better than Generator in some ways, but weaker in others, making this a pretty good card overall. Run Gale Dogger for the memes to draw 5 cards, I promise, it's a good idea. Property Flash is a continuous trap and has the following effect. Activate this card when you take battle damage. Place one property counter on this card for every 1,000 damage you took. Then end the battle phase. Once per turn, you can tribute one Hydradrive Link monster. Place a property counter on this card. You can send this card with a property counter to the graveyard. Special summon one Hydradrive Link monster from your extra deck with the same Link rating as the number of property counters on this card. Only activate one per turn. Alright, we're back to the weird ones. I swear, this is my life now. Flash is such a meh battle fader effect with random counters that, I will admit, does indeed help in cheating out the Link monsters for plays. And ironically, you may end up wanting to focus getting counters on it to cheat out a Tesseract or a Dragrid instead of actually trying to play the game legitimately. Would you really want to have 1,000 battle damage per counter for the activation that fizzles out as soon as you hit 6 counters? Or roll a 6, or anything other than a 2 or 3 on Dragrid? Really situational, but in a theoretical Hydradrive deck, you could run a few copies and be secured somewhat. I'd run 3. Hydradrive Tolerance is a normal trap and has the following effect. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, target one Hydradrive Link monster in your graveyard that was destroyed and sent there this turn. Reduce any battle damage you would take from that battle by that monster's Link rating times 300. Also, you take no further battle or effect damage until the end phase. Tolerance is, bad. It's meh damage reduction based on a monster dying, and it's only good for the side effect. But even then, it's based on a Hydradrive Link dying in that turn and was sent to the graveyard. Flat out ignore this card. Hydradrive Nightmare is what I'm feeling right now. It's also a normal trap with the following effect. If your Hydradrive Link monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, target one Hydradrive Link monster in your graveyard. Tribute a monster, and if you do, special summon that target, but negate its effects, also destroy it during the end phase. Again, more poor attempts at giving the archetype Swarms a revival. It's just a basic revival trap that's based on destruction, and you have to tribute a monster for it. If only we had Lair Hydradrives to make that a benefit, but for the love of God, don't make Lair Hydradrive. Run none of this. This was the trap Haru gave us. I'm gonna take that 1 star back. No gold star for you. Dice Logic is a continuous trap and has the following effect. Once per attack, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can target that attacking monster. Roll a 6-sided die and apply the result. Once per turn, if you activate this effect during a turn in which you applied another effect that rolls a die, and the result of this effect is 5 or lower, you can apply this effect as the result plus 1. 1, 3, or 5. Change the attack of the targeted monster and monsters with that same name to 0 until the end of this turn. 2, 4, or 6. The attack of the targeted monster and monsters with that same name becomes double their current attack until the end of this turn. If this face-up card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 1 Hydradrive Link monster from your extra deck. Wow. Here I thought I was reading a goddamn Orgot the Relentless support card before it mentioned Hydradrives at the end. Either way, it is just a terrible dice-based card and effect in general, with added cheats via the result plus 1 part, which is kinda cool. Yet only the odd rolls are decent for stopping them sick as hell Cypher plays. Not to mention the terrible wording, given it's hard to tell if this affects other dice cards or just itself. On top of that is the destruction to summon a Hydradrive Link from the extra deck that's also terrible. Because the moment your opponent sees this card, they'll ignore it like the plague or spin it with Unicorn. Ignore this card and, hey, good job, you already forgot what this does, didn't ya? Trust me, I don't blame you. The entire second sentence feels like it was written on ecstasy and Adderall combined to make the most hyper and least productive person the world has ever known. As for the final card, yes, we're at the final card, we have Hydradrive Gravity, a normal trap with the following effect. When an opponent's monster declares an attack while you control a Link monster in the extra monster zone, target that opponent's monster. Move it to your opponent's main monster zone your Link monster in the extra monster zone points to. If you would target a monster whose current attack is higher than its original attack with this card, you can activate this card from your hand. And we go out on a little sparkling firecracker dude. This was only used for Atlas to make it immune to attack targeting in one duel. That's all it was used for. Nothing more. Goodbye. And I'm done here. Clocking out. Peace! And that's Hydradrives. What do I think about them? Well, what do you think I think about them? Hydradrives are just plain awful. It's as if the anime had a solid idea for an antagonist who used elemental counters for the protagonist and the Ignis, but they handled it in such a haphazard way it just made it flat out confusing and lackluster in the end. The biggest sins for Hydradrive are numerous, but if I had to boil them down, it would be a lack of any stun for light and dark, and the Link materials as a whole being ridiculous. Aside from a handful of monsters, most Hydradrive Links take exact numbers of archetypical Link monsters to make, the 2 of them needing the same attributes as well, and 1 needing different attributes for whatever reason. Exact materials can work with powerful effects to balance them out, but if they were going to put that as the limit, please go for either exact materials or Link monsters, and don't just throw down both to render the speed of the deck equivalent to that of molasses going uphill in the snow. This effectively makes a stopgap in the strategy, given your deck quickly becomes a single playstyle of spamming the Link 1 monsters the best you can, trying to revive those monsters multiple times over and over to meet those exact requirements. And don't get me started on how much waste of potential Chimera and the Dragheads had, because we'd be here forever and a day. And then you get a plethora of spells and traps trying to mix multiple effects like Revival, Token, Spell effects, and then we have a traffic accident. Of course, the only reason any of this BS worked against Aoi and Soulburner in the first place was because they had to make Bowman the big bad this season despite having a pretty good antagonist already in the form of Lightning, sacrificing more of Aoi's development that didn't exist, as well as making this Soulburner's only loss a loss equivalent to that of Glass Joe's only win in Punch-Out. In short, watch Series 7 when it comes out, and watch more Dynasty the Useless! Bye!